Our Trust Shot Full of Holes by nolov louscr.
Summary. When he's 12, Izuku meets his best friend. Neither of them are especially good at having friends, but they make do. The other shoe drops less than a week into his first year at UA. The Future Forged in Our Palms by nolov louscr. Summary. The deep breath Izuku takes is steadying, a comfort. Hope newly fostered in his heart is too difficult to stifle. Might Doria, 427. Want to play again tomorrow? There is so much fear in asking, shredding and heavy at his lungs, and it only grows as minutes pass. Izuku has been alone for so long, and weariness, in all the forms he knows it, has been etched into his bones and soul. Chapter 1. If I'm player 2 and you're player 2, then who's flying the spaceship? The glow of his computer is starting to burn his eyes after so many hours. Izuku still isn't ready to sleep. His body aches for it, exhaustion sinking its fangs into the back of his neck and its claws into his ribs. But there is a current of something, so well fed by a bad day, that keeps his eyes from slipping closed. He knew going in that junior high would be worse than elementary. He isn't sure why the confirmation aches so sharply. The bubbling of fear beneath his skin still lingers, even though he's safe in his room, away from Kachan, away from the pain. Almost as though to spite him, the burnt skin on his hands and neck sting viciously, and it almost makes him choke on air, his panic bubbling up so quickly at the reminder. It feels like drowning on dry land, body crumpled against the hard and unforgiving crash of the ocean. On screen, his character dies again, the animation for it familiar and dramatic. Exhaustion and everything else building in his chest dulls his caring. He respawns a few moments later, almost at the same time as a message that pops up on his screen. T redacted 4, 348. How the fuck did that kill you? You had cover and dodged for his last round. Might Doria, 348. Got distracted, sorry. They've been playing together for almost the entire time Izuku's been on at this point, and he knows he should probably stop now that he's died and his school alarm is fast approaching. But playing stupid games with strangers mind-numbing draws Izuku away from the world. It also doesn't hurt that his partner is good at all the games they've played. Izuku dies twice more, once to a knife and once to a fall, before halfway through a strategic retreat across the map. His partner's avatar suddenly goes still. Unsure of whether to run or wait, Izuku hesitates, and they're both killed by another duo on the server. He gets kicked to the start screen with the bold title Vetamas, letting him know his partner dropped from the round. The corner of his screen pings with another message. T redacted 4, 423. Sorry, accidentally destroyed my controller. Quirk accident. Might Doria, 423. No problem. Do you have to stop playing now? Since you don't have a controller. T redacted 4, 425. Yeah, but thankfully it wasn't the keyboard this time. You know, you're not so bad for a player 2. Might Doria, 425. Oh, so I'm player 2, huh? Not the one of us that had to be saved from the yellow team. T redacted 4, 426. Says the one who got headshotted because they were basically AFK. The deep breath Izuku takes is steadying, a comfort. Hope newly fostered in his heart is too difficult to stifle. Might Doria, 427. Want to play again tomorrow? There is so much fear in asking, shredding and heavy at his lungs, and it only grows as minutes pass. Izuku has been alone for so long, and weariness, in all the forms he knows it, has been etched into his very bones and soul. Even through a screen, people can be cruel, can twist a knife into the softest parts of you. It's a lesson Izuku had to learn early. T redacted 4, 431. Sure. A month after the first time they played together, when Izuku had felt like he was shattering anew, Tomura still talks to him. Izuku isn't sure when he should expect the older boy to leave permanently anymore. After all their fights and the days his friend just disappears sometimes. Tomura is unpredictable and has more bad days than good, but in his own way, angry and distant and awkward, he's shown to be a good friend. Izuku hopes it will last. Tomura 4 FNG 2212. I still don't understand your love for heroes. It's kinda disgusting. Mike Doria 2213. And that's fine. I know you don't like them, but I think there are a lot of heroes whose devotion to saving people is admirable. He does not mention All Might. No matter how much he loves the number one hero, he knows it's a difficult subject for Tomura. It's a conversation they only ever touch in his best days, especially after the first time Izuku had mentioned him. Tomura had stopped replying to his messages for a week after his hour-long rant. The number one hero generally sends the older boy spiraling, his messages coming too fast for Izuku to read and growing progressively angrier before he finally breaks his keyboard in what Izuku has learned are very common mishaps with his quirk. Izuku's just glad Tomura hasn't realized who his username alludes to. Changing it after so many years would be annoying. Tomura 4 FNG 2214. They're just so oblivious. It's their fault people are so apathetic to anyone who struggles. They breed violence. Mike Doria 2214. Just because some do doesn't invalidate the whole system. If we only had the police, it would still breed violence. As it stands, a lot of heroes are non-violent or take that route as the first option, though sadly not the majority. Like Midnight, or rescue heroes like the Wild Wild Pussycats. When the little banner announcing that Tomura is typing sticks around for longer than 30 seconds, Izuku cringes. He probably should have steered them away from this conversation immediately after he first brought it up. Today wasn't exactly a bad day for Tomura as far as he was aware, but that didn't mean the older boy wouldn't get upset over the conversation on heroes. Honestly, Izuku isn't sure why Tomura hasn't stopped talking to him over this. Tomura 4 FNG 2217. A few heroes who aren't monsters doesn't change the fact that heroics has warped society, and I know you've experienced this firsthand, even if you won't say why. You're the same, so why can't you agree with me? Heroes have abandoned us. They'd never save you. Something sharp in Izuku's chest aches. He knows Tomura is just as bad at this, having friends. Izuku is bad at it too, but sometimes the older boy forgets how far is too far, says something that feels like a knife when he's just trying to explain himself. Now, Izuku can only stare at the word you and hurt. Even if Tomura obviously meant us and everyone else that is deemed lesser by society, it isn't what he typed. They won't save Izuku because he didn't have a quirk. It would be a boon to society if he died. One of the third year's taunts echoes in his head, goading Izuku to walk into a villain attack and knock him out the other side. There is bile in his throat. Mike Doria, 2226. Let's just talk about something else. Izuku knows Tomura will take it as in winning their argument. The older boy still has trouble recognizing how Izuku is feeling since they communicate mostly through texts, but there will be time to argue another day, when Izuku's lungs don't feel full of ice. Tomura 4 FNG 2228. What do you think of the new Wild Soul game coming out? Tomura 4 FNG 1657. Where are you? You've been online the last few times I messaged. Why won't you reply? He knows Tomura can see him typing when he starts, but it's a slow process. The end of his first term of junior high is fast approaching, only 2 weeks away, and the meanest of his peers had apparently not wanted him to have a relaxing month off. The hand wrapped in a cast, fingers immobilized by splints, is useless for typing, so Izuku has to use only one, the bandaged hand, to keep his burnt, blistered palm from getting infected. Mike Doria, 1702. Sorry, bad hand injuries. They're difficult to type with. Tomura 4 FNG, 1703. What happened? Mike Doria, 1709. Some third years in Kachan got a little too rough, but it's fine. Mike Doria, 1715. Plus, it doesn't matter, there's only like a week until I'm 13, and one of my hands will be healed by then. Tomura 4 FNG, 1716. Only one hand being healed after a week, when you've been gone for one already, doesn't seem like it's fine. Mike Doria, 1718. It's not a big deal, Tomura. There's so much more he wants to say, but Izuku stops typing. His hand is beginning to throb, sharp pains shooting through his fingers from all the movement. He is so thankful that neither injury will do any damage more long-lasting than a particularly nasty scare. Tomura 4 FNG, 1718. Give me their names. Another of Tomura's oddities. He's asked twice before, once after Izuku was sent to detention for fighting, when a teacher caught him standing between one of the third years and another kid in his grade, and a second time when Kachan had left a hand-shaped burn through the fabric of Izuku's uniform. He's never given the older boy any names, but he finds the demand a little funny every time. Tomura just turned 16 a few months back, and is probably only in his second year of high school. Izuku isn't really sure what he could do against a teacher hell-bent on getting Izuku in trouble. Might Doria, 1719. No, LOL. His hand gives a throb in protest, even to those 6 characters, and with a roll of his eyes, goes offline, rolling away from his desk with a kick of his feet. Thinking about his injuries is the last thing he wants to do. It only leads to memories of Katon's face all twisted up in anger over something he saw in Izuku's notebooks, and then the explosive blonde's hand on his, knocking his pencil away, holding them palm to palm as fire and concussive force was stifled between them for a few short seconds. Memories of standing between Hoshida and Morokawa a few days later for what felt like the 1000th time. Of Hoshida's anger with him finally boiling over as the third year used his quirk to break the arm and hand Izuku had extended to protect Morikawa. Instead, Izuku wanders from his room, following the sound of his mom bustling around the kitchen. Inko gives him a small smile when he exits the hallway. "How are you doing, Izuku?" she asks, her voice gentle, just loud enough to be heard over the news she must have been watching for background noise. "Good." Izuku takes a seat in front of the TV, content to watch the latest of Ed Shot's latest fight, even though he really wants to help his mom cook. "My left hand hasn't been hurting too much since it was casted after the fall, but it's a little itchy." The half-truth still tastes bitter. Izuku wants to message Tomura. He's used to talking to the older boy on nearly every one of his good days. It's become a familiar routine, whether they argue the merits of heroes, talk about their days, or just play games. But today is Izuku's birthday, and he can't bring himself to message the person he considers his best friend. It makes him feel slimy, purposely not changing his status to online, even as he lurks. He knows Tomura is his friend. Izuku hasn't given him any reason to leave yet, but something bitter and hurt in his heart, buried under layers of being okay, whispers that Tomura doesn't remember Izuku when they aren't actively talking. He refreshes one of his tabs, the one detailing the recent arrest made by Endeavor. Hidden in the long report is a list of injuries the criminal had received and the estimated amount of property damage. It gets noted down alongside the rest of the information Izuku had found on the number 2 hero's recent arrests. The practice was something Izuku had started for Tomura, a physical log to remind himself of what was wrong with the way heroics currently operated, a reminder of what he wanted so desperately to change, even if he'd never be strong enough to make that big of an impact. After a long silent treatment from the older boy, Tomura had promised to do something similar for Izuku, tracking a few rescue heroes and trying to remember that the world wasn't only composed of violence. His computer dings with a familiar chime. Tomura 4FNG. 1539. Happy birthday, Player 2. Mike Doria, 1539. Thanks, Player 3. Smiley face. Tomura 4FNG. 1539. I will kill you. Relief beats like a drum in his chest, the bitter and lost part of himself losing its grip, but the guilt is not so easily swayed. Mike Doria, 1540. But it's my birthday, Tomura. You wouldn't kill me on my birthday. Tomura 4FNG, 1541. Who's to say it would be today? Want to voice chat and play Sunforce? Mike Doria, 1541. Yeah. The request comes in 2 minutes later, beeping steadily. It takes no time to finish finding his headset and put up the game. Tomura 4FNG, 1543. Incoming call. Mike Doria, 1543. Call accepted. Happy birthday, Player 2. Tomura says, after giving the call a moment of silence to connect properly. His voice is rough and raspy, like he's either not spoken in a while or someone had hit him in the throat recently. So you said. A beat, and Izuku can already feel the anxiety clawing up his stomach. Even though he knows Tomura isn't a threat, he doesn't know what Izuku is. But, thank you. Tomura sounds extremely disgusted when he asks it, but he manages to grit out. Your mom got you All Might merch or something this year? Izuku clicks start on Sunforce and searches Tomura's account, the same T-Redacted4 username as when they first played together. Not this year. I actually asked for some of Gang Orca and Wavefront, their team up on the Rishi disasters to save everyone that got trapped by the destabilized buildings and flooding was amazing. Tomura's sigh is obviously annoyed, but a second passes before he actually replies. Wavefront isn't terrible, I guess. If Izuku thought Tomura wouldn't hear him, he would have cried. Instead, a near boundless grin splits his face and he bounces a little in his seat as his friend accepts his request to play together. That was the kindest thing he'd ever heard Tomura say about a hero. Sunforce starts up, and the animated diagrams of their 2 ships appear on the screen. I won't be able to run off any defensive measures effectively since my left arm is still in the cast, Izuku warns his friend, drawing them away from any thought of heroes. It's his favourite topic, but Izuku knows Tomura gets anxious and angry if he thinks about them for too long. I can cover that if you take care of any resources that we find or shield mishaps until we hit the deep space levels. No way will we make it to those without both of us being able to run offense and defense, Izuku whines, picking through a few options for his ship with one hand. Tomura's scoff nearly devolves into a cough, but the dramatic sound succeeds in making Izuku smile anyway. Deep space levels are easy, player 2. The biggest challenge is going to be the bosses in the Nova Rim levels. As long as we get through the space dude just after the Grey sells us the new parts, it'll be fine. Beating him again is the perfect birthday present. Fuck space dude, Tomura says, laughing. The sound is a little too loud and too dry, like laughing even that much hurts. Izuku smiles with him, 5 fingers flying over his keyboard. They play Sun Force for nearly 4 hours until they get stuck on the final Nova Rim boss like Tomura had predicted. It's their 4th attempt when one of the boss's finishing moves starts charging up, and 2 seconds later Tomura's ship stops moving, and a loud exclamation of "Fuck!" comes through the call. Moments later, both of their ships are destroyed. Your keyboard bite the dust again? Izuku asks after a moment. The rough bark of laughter is unexpected, but still makes Izuku smile. Sure did, player 2. Tomura sighs. There's nothing left from Q to U. Pity, we might have had it that time. No way in hell, Pipsqueak. Oh, that's a new one, Izuku hops, rolling his eyes. You don't even know how tall I am. You're 13, thus you're a Pipsqueak, Tomura says, voice only more rough after talking for so long. Izuku lets his head fall to his desk, ignoring more of Tomura's near maniacal laughter. Whatever, he grumbles, closing Sunforce. They sit in silence for a few moments before Izuku barely catches his mom calling for him from the kitchen. He immediately sits up a little straighter. Oh, I gotta go, Tomura. Dinner's ready. Thanks for playing with me. It was really fun. His thanks feel too small to cover how much these few hours spent with a friend mean to Izuku, after so many years of spending his birthday alone. I'll message when I get my hands on a new keyboard. Happy birthday, Izuku. Tomura 4FNG, 1933. Call ended. 4 hours. Chapter 2. F is for friends who are trying their best. School is bad, plain and simple. It has never not been bad, but the fact feels sharper today, staring up as Kachan looms over his desk. He had managed to text Tomura once before his childhood friend had arrived. My Doria, 12:32. Thoughts on a new trailer for Resonance Rising? Lunch had only just started. It ends in the courtyard, his food left in his backpack and a new burn on his arm. The ringing that's been growing in his ears since he was 8 so much louder than usual. It makes the world fade away, distant and unable to hurt him, and it'd be welcome if he could keep an ear out for any threats. His phone beeps with a message, as it had been often through the lunch period. Kachan hadn't been very happy with the interruption of multiple texts. Even beyond the interruption, he'd been pissed that anyone was actually messaging Izuku. Underneath the cottony feel of his mind, Izuku was surprised to see that its screen hadn't been shattered when he pulls it out. Tomura 4FNG, 12:37. It looks pretty good. The graphics seems pretty smooth, and hopefully they'll get the plot as well as our Falling Dead. It also has dogs, so 10 out of 10 on that. Tomura 4FNG, 12:40. The new development of power types and systems also seems pretty interesting. Dividing it into sources of resonance to be developed will work well for gaining experience and excelling against different bosses. Tomura 4FNG, 12:43. Player 2. Tomura 4FNG, 12:45. Why aren't you replying? You're online. Tomura 4FNG, 12:51. What the fuck? Tomura 4FNG, 12:56. Kurogiri said you're probably in class, but it's lunchtime. Are you okay? Tomura 4FNG, 13:04. Quick accident with the computer, so I'm on mobile. Izuku? There is bile in the back of Izuku's throat, and something scared and guilty plays in his stomach. He knows Tomura burns through things with his quirk accidents at a pretty steady rate, but to know he brought this one on by not replying and worrying him stings with every breath. His hands shake as he replies, and makes his heart ache to lie, because he knows that Tomura will see right through it. But lying is safer. Lying means he won't have to explain the truth, and then never hear from Tomura again. My Doria, 13:05. I'm sorry, Tomura. Kachan and his friends were so distracting I didn't hear the notifs. Might Doria, 1306. Lunch is almost over, but if you want we can talk about our rising after I get out of school. I need to figure out what exactly they're doing with Runa before I get attached like with Nanami and our falling. Tomura doesn't reply before lunch ends, and Izuku has to go offline, muting his phone. From across the room, Kachan and his friends glare when Izuku takes a seat, ducking his head and staring resolutely at his desk. The name Deku is scrawled across the top right corner, same as it had been since 3 weeks into the school year, and even now at the start of his 3rd term. It makes Izuku want to run and hide. Instead, he grits his teeth, closes his eyes, and tells himself it is only for 3 more months and 2 more years. Then he'll finally be safe. Every year, March 31st feels like a death sentence to Izuku. Every year he stays up too late, crying into his pillow and hoping for something to change, for something to be better, even though it wouldn't be in the morning. This year, though, the day still turns to dusk like a death, but instead of muffling sobs into his pillow, Izuku messages Tomura. Might Doria, 2346. How do I survive 2 more years of junior high? Tomura 4FNG, 2346. Who knows, player 2? Certainly not me. Kurogiri says you just have to stick it out. Izuku doesn't exactly know who Kurogiri is. He knows that Tomura asks them for advice and relays it to Izuku often, and that they often fill Tomura in on things that he's confused by when Izuku mentions them in passing, having assumed Tomura already knew. And because they apparently confiscate Tomura's keyboard if he loses control of his quirk on too many in a row. Kurogiri in Tomura's messages has always seemed to know what to do, so Izuku believes it. Might Doria, 2349. These next 2 years are going to be the worst of my life. Might Doria, 2350. The only bright point will actually be having a friend. Also, tell Kurogiri thank you. Tomura 4FNG, 2350. A friend? Might Doria, 2350. Yeah? What else would you think you are? Realization catches up to Izuku 5 minutes later, after he realizes Tomura hasn't even begun to type back, despite being online. He watches with bated breath for longer than he cares to admit, blood boiling with the hope that maybe he still hasn't chased Tomura away. He shouldn't have called him his friend. Izuku was just a kid Tomura played stupid games with sometimes when he was bored and hadn't destroyed his remote too recently. Izuku had overstepped at best, and killed any chance of Tomura speaking to him again at worst. The word friend feels distinctly like a blight, tearing every connection he's ever had to someone up by its roots, poisoning each thread that ties them to another. Hope feels like something dark and tragic. Minutes after midnight rolls around, and the day Izuku dreads the most every year has arrived. Tomura goes offline without replying to his message. At least he's never had to work up the will to tell Tomura he was quirkless. Instead, he ran the boy off with just his presence. Maybe Kachan was right about him, an unneeded weight on society. A Deku. The panic felt like spiders over his arms and in his chest. He didn't want to be alone again. He couldn't survive being alone again. Not now that he knew what he'd miss if he returned to the monotonous days of loneliness he'd passed since his quirk failed to appear. No air is entering Izuku's lungs, and his vision is distant and fuzzy. Familiar ringing rises in his ears, clanging through his skull. Izuku curls up into a ball where he lays, clutching his pillow to his chest as he gasps, and waits for the feeling of boiling over to pass. When he calms down, what feels like either minutes or hours later, he can't stop himself from messaging Tomura again. Might Doria, 127. I'm sorry. Tomura isn't online the morning of April 4th, and Izuku's stomach twists violently when he sees their last conversation, dated for March 31st, and the single message sent on April 1st when he checks. It felt like much longer than 4 days since he had talked to Tomura, each school day passing as a dull procession of insults and injuries until the bell rang for freedom, and each afternoon spent doing homework until his head dipped with exhaustion, eyes flicking to the computer or his phone to check if Tomura was online. The loneliness of it is like a knife slips between Izuku's ribs, and something in his mind begs to rip the blade free and bleed his misery over anyone in range, waiting for a message that wasn't coming, from a person who probably hated him was almost as good. Today is different though, because it's Tomura's birthday, and the part of Izuku's heart that isn't sheltered by something hurt and scared can only think of the unrefined joy he had felt, spending his last birthday playing Sun Force at Tomura. It feels wrong for the day to pass unacknowledged, even if Tomura is still offline. Might Doria, 658. Happy 17th birthday, Tomura. I hope you have a good day. Smiley face. Izuku doesn't allow himself to hope for a reply as he gets ready for school. Losing it for a second time would be too much. None of that stops the flutter of maybe that bursts to life in Izuku's chest every time his phone vibrates. It happens twice on the way to school, notifications from his email, and each time Izuku nearly stumbles in his desperate scramble to check. Kachan's laughter echoes in his head, sharp and biting, insisting that Izuku was never meant to have a friend. He was meant to be alone, so he wouldn't poison those around him. Tomura had finally figured it out. The school day passes as normal, as it has every day since his second year started. Kachan sneers something derisive at him in the morning, before the bell can ring. At lunch, Izuku hides as best he can behind one of the trees in the courtyard. These days, it's safer than trying to hide in the bathroom. The final bell, Izuku races to pack his bag and leave before anyone can corner him. Today, he succeeds. He runs from his classroom down the stairs and out of the building like there's fire on his heels. And with Kachan's quirk, there may as well be. Once he's halfway home, Izuku allows himself to slow, pace falling to a walk instead of the frantic fleeing it had been. The weather is nice today, and he almost wishes it would rain so the sky would match how his heart plummets every time he looks at his phone and then is reminded that Tomura knows enough to run now. Getting home takes longer than it should have after how quickly Izuku made the first half of the trip. Inko is still at work when Izuku arrives, so he curls up in his bed, computer on nearby, and wireless mouse clutched in his hand. The screen displays his messages with Tomura, and the little indicator that says he's offline and has been for almost 4 days. Izuku thinks it would be healthier if he wasn't doing this, but he doesn't move to close the program or turn away from the screen. He just scrolls the last conversation that they had about the True Hunt series, and stares sightlessly at it. Sleep comes to him in waves as he lays there, huddled in a pitiful ball on his bed. Time fades in and out, moments between things stretching for hours or minutes. His mom gets home at some point, tells him if he wants dinner there's leftovers in the fridge. The energy needed to move feels as though it had been sapped from his chest. He isn't sure he's awake when his eyes blink open to the little indicator beside Tomura's profile lit green to show he's online. Izuku blinks slowly at the change, wireless mouse still clutched to his chest. Sitting up or rubbing his eyes to clear his imagination from them feel like impossible goals. At the bottom of his screen, just above his text box, the little banner pops up, announcing that Tomura is typing. Something miraculously unbroken and hopeful stirs in Izuku's chest like a song. He's already crying when his computer dings with a message, another banner popping up to show he has an unread message lower in the chat. Tomura 4 FNG 1722. Sunforce in voice chat. Mike Doria 1723. Incoming call. Tomura 4 FNG 1723. Call accepted. Izuku doesn't even have his headphones plugged in, and there are tears still shaking his shoulders because Tomura isn't gone. The line is silent as he tries not to sob loudly enough for Tomura to hear. He isn't alone. Layer 2. Tomura cuts himself off sharply enough that Izuku can hear his teeth clack together. Izuku. His voice is even worse than the first time they spoke. I'm sorry. The dam breaks at that, and Izuku feels himself crumble inwards, his tears finally winning. He knows the sound is ugly and loud and painful, but Tomura is back. The friend he'd spoken to nearly every day for almost a year. I thought you'd never speak to me again, he manages through jerking sobs, wiping frantically at his eyes. Izuku would almost assume the small sound that came from his computer was a muffled sob if his head was any clearer. I know. Tomura's voice is rougher yet. He trails off, and there's a noise of frustration across the call, like Tomura's annoyed he can't figure out the words he needs. I was scared, but I still shouldn't have done that. Yeah? His voice feels too small, and the parts of Izuku that have been beaten down too many times are terrified that Tomura is going to laugh and end the call, just as everyone before him had done. Yeah, Tomura agrees at a whisper instead. Another pause, and it's obvious that Tomura is struggling with both his emotions and words now, his voice strained and stilted. I'm not familiar with having friends. I've never had any reason to before. Izuku doesn't ask why, just wipes at his eyes and ignores how his heart aches over the idea of Tomura lacking friends, just as he does so he doesn't start crying harder. Same here. he says quietly, finally moving enough to get closer to his computer. The silence that brews over the call is thick and painful. Izuku wants to tell Tomura that he's quirkless, that it bore his fear of being left behind. He wants to hear why Tomura, who is abrasive and angry and childish, but beneath it all a good friend and strategic thinker, had been so scared of having a friend that he had run away. Instead, Izuku clicks on one of the icons on his desktop, a ship emblazed with a large star. So, Izuku draws out as the game loads. Sunforce, birthday boy? Tomura's laugh is still grating and painful, and Izuku can't help but smile at the familiar sound, even if he's still covered in tear tracts. If we don't beat Nova around this time, I'm destroying my keyboard on purpose, he promises. Might Doria, 147. There's still a week and a half until R Rising comes out, right? Tomura 4FNG, 147. Yeah, first Tuesday of December. Why? Might Doria, 147. No reason. But also because I'm going to play through R Falling again just to refresh my memory. Tomura 4FNG, 150. You said it took you a month and a half to play through it the first time. Might Doria, 151. And it'll take me a week and a half to play through it a second time. No biggie. Tomura 4FNG, 151. You are going to die. R Falling is way too long for that while you still have school. Lol. Might Doria, 151. Watch me, coward. Besides, second turn ends in a week, so I'll have 96 hours straight of freedom to power through the last acts before the release. Smiley face. Might Doria, 152. Plus, I'll have coffee. Tomura 4FNG, 152. If God doesn't kill you soon, I will. Chapter 3. Izuku's terrible, no good, very bad days. Izuku stares down at the sheet of paper that had been sent home, trying to envision a world where he filled it out as he wanted instead of what is expected of him. His pencil feels like a shackle in his palm. The pointed look his teacher had given him as the sheet was handed out was a clear threat to keep his choice within what was considered reasonable. He was sure the paper would just be shredded if he wrote what he actually wanted to on it. A gentle kick sends Izuku rolling across the floor in his chair until he can reach his phone where he had tossed it on his bed. He still has until tomorrow, the first day of their last week of second year, so he can ask Tomura if he has any ideas. Might Doria, 1640. School is making us write down which high schools we plan to apply to and take the exams for next year. I don't know what to write. Tomura 4FNG, 1617. I thought you had your whole hero shtick you were going to pursue. Might Doria, 1617. I do. Tomura 4FNG, 1617. Then write that. It's not hard. Might Doria, 1618. I'll get a 0 if I do that, or the teacher will say I didn't turn it in. Tomura starts and stops typing multiple times for the next minute, and Izuku realizes his mistake. He knows the older team can get protective sometimes. It usually comes out in falsely calm requests for names. At this point, Izuku can recognize when Tomura's dislike for how Izuku's school operates reaches the boiling point. Damage control doesn't usually work when it happens, but it couldn't hurt to try. Might Doria, 1620. It's fine though, this is just a preliminary survey. They can't actually stop me from applying to a hero school. Tomura 4FNG, 1621. Why the fuck would your teachers do that? Might Doria, 1621. It doesn't matter. Tomura 4FNG, 1621. It kind of does if they're going to give you zeros because of it. It's not fair. Might Doria, 1622. I know. And Izuku does know. Sort of. He should get the same chances as his classmates. He shouldn't be given zeros for existing, but a part of him is used to it, resigned to it. The weakest parts of him are sure they're right, that he isn't as capable as his peers. Tomura 4FNG, 1623. Why won't you tell me why the whole school treat you like shit? Midoriya, 1623. I can't. Tomura 4FNG, 1623. Why not? Do you have a shit quirk or something? Because I literally disintegrate anything I touch with 5 fingers. Might Doria, 1624. That's not a shit quirk. Tomura 4FNG, 1625. And yours is? He squeezes his phone tight, turning it off and dropping his head, trying to breathe steadily. Everything feels unbalanced, and fear is waking in his chest. The phone beeps and he checks the message on instinct. Tomura 4FNG, 1631. Saying this literally makes me want to throw up and stab my own eyes out and break out in hives, but if anyone can figure out how to use a shit quirk to somehow not be a disgusting hero, it'd be you. Izuku curls up tight, ducking his head to his knees and shaking. He isn't surprised by Tomura's assumption, but something about it still hurts. No matter how much it warms him for Tomura to have said he could be a good hero, Izuku knows Tomura doesn't measure the worth of heroes by quirk, so the words mean something despite their initial intent. But it still hurts, because Izuku doesn't have a shitty quirk, no matter how hard he wishes he did. Izuku flops away from his computer with a quiet wail. Tomura, he whines. Why can't you just be on my team? You know I suck at Beta Mass. Tomura scoffs. Player 2, you don't just suck at this one, you're a missile. Izuku sees his friend's character approaching where his character had just respawned, and starts frantically trying to put some distance between them and to get to the other side of the arena where his teammate is. Moments later, his character dies. Not fair! Life's not fair, pipsqueak. Tomura laughs. Before he can respond, a replay shows Tomura killing his teammate with a well-timed knife, and Izuku is booted from the server. He lets out a long sigh of defeat. I refuse to play another round of Vetanas. Tomura only hums, the clack of his keys audible. Sunforce, then, he offers. A glance at the clock tells Izuku it's well past midnight. Next time, he huffs, glaring at the time. I've got to get to sleep soon if I want to make it to the last day on time. School sucks. Yeah. Izuku watches 2 minutes tick by, not speaking but not ending the call. The click of Tomura's keyboard has stopped. The silence stretches, elastic and consuming. I talked to Kurogiri about what I said Sunday. Tomura's voice is tight, reluctant, as though he's dragging the words out of himself in all of their raspy and cracked glory. He said I probably overstepped or insulted you, so I wanted to say sorry. The apology is rushed, embarrassed. Izuku tries not to let the fear sink into him at the topic of conversation. It's fine. He tries to assure his friend, hoping it'll be enough. It isn't. It's not fine, player 2. Tomura practically hisses. They treat you like shit and I don't understand. There is a pain in his voice under the cold fury, and guilt rises like fire in Izuku's throat. Izuku has avoided telling Tomura the truth, and it was hurting the older teen, the weight of not knowing. He'd forgotten someone besides his mother had cared that much about him. Izuku still hesitates, though, opening his mouth to speak before snapping it closed again, twisting the nearest pillow anxiously in his hands. Tomura is his friend. But Kachan had been his friend, too. You were wrong, Izuku admits, and the words feel rushed and heavy, like a nail in a coffin. On Sunday. I don't have a weak quirk. Tomura doesn't speak, probably aware that Izuku is still struggling to finish his thought. I just don't have a quirk. There isn't a gasp of surprise or disgust or any other sound from Tomura's end of the call, and Izuku feels his panic mounting, even as though he isn't sure the silence is good or bad. Before he can think it through, he's clicking through to his conversation with Tomura and cancelling the call. Might Doria 0059. Call ended. 3 hours. Familiar fear, the same as when he told Tomura they were friends, grips his lungs. The computer beeps with a notification. Tomura 4FNG 102. I'll kick your whole school's ass for treating you like shit for something that dumb. The tears that immediately stream down Izuku's face are happy ones. Tomura 4FNG 431. I still can't believe you're going to be a hero. It's kind of unsettling to think about. It makes my skin itch. The trappings of heroics will ruin you, Izuku. I don't want you to be like All Might. I know we have the don't talk about All Might rule, but I hate him so much. He represents everything that's wrong in society, the reason people are blind to the rotten suffering. I wish he didn't exist. Tomura 4 FNG 433. We talked about wavefronts and the Pussycats work before, and I think that's okay, but the message that I am here can solve everything is poisonous. You'd be a good rescue hero, player 2. Tomura 4 FNG 447. If I'm still online, can we voice chat before you go to school? Izuku rubs his eyes, staring at the long string of messages that sent 3 hours ago. He isn't unfamiliar with Tomura's thoughts on All Might, but the older teen usually keeps him out of their conversations, just as Izuku tries to do the same. But something in the messages seems scattered, paranoid. A quick check for green tells him that Tomura is still online. Might Doria 805. I've been off school for a while now? Might Doria 805. Incoming call. Tomura 4FNG 806. Call accepted. Are you okay? Izuku asks as the call connects and he knows he'll be heard. The only sound on the other end of the call for a few moments is a faint scratching, the noise non-stop and frantic. Tomura? Player 2, his friend whispers back, the scratching dying down, and he sounds like he's in pain. Izuku's stomach clenches with anxiety. Tell me if you're okay. The scratching picks up again, just a frantic, slower, yes. Tomura starts, voice raw and rasping. No, I don't know. He coughs. The scratching noise pauses before continuing. Everything is going wrong and I don't understand why. It's like... He pauses, air heaving in his lungs, scratching still echoing down the line. It's like in Winsel 1 after the Snowgrave puzzles, and you try to solve the title one, but do it wrong and there's no way to reset. Tomura's voice is practically a growl now. Everything's in the wrong place. Izuku takes a second to breathe past the fear crawling down his veins. He doesn't know what to do beyond the need to help. Tomura, it'll be okay. I'll help you figure it out, but first I need you to tell me what the scratching noise is. The whine that comes through the headphones is broken and pained, grit out over damaged vocal cords. It sounds painful. I can't do it, I can't. Tomura mutters, his voice rapid and panicked, rising from the shattered sound. The tears come quickly, and before he knows it, Izuku is sobbing, unable to console his friend. I don't know how to help, Tomura, he whispers between desperate breaths. Tell me what you need. The scratching noise slows, and for some reason it sounds less dry. Tomura makes a pained noise that Izuku can just barely hear. A door creaks in Izuku's headphones, and a deep voice calls out. Shigaraki Tomura? Tomura's breathing is fast and sharp, and Izuku is still so scared and crying. Hello? He calls into the microphone, hoping Tomura had skipped using headphones like he does sometimes when he's recently destroyed a pair. The click of shoes against wood flooring is audible as a new person enters the room. Tomura's voice rasps out, Kurogiri, and Izuku jolts with recognition. Kurogiri-san, is Tomura okay? He calls out, hoping and hoping and hoping, trying and failing to sound like he's not still sobbing his heart out. For a moment, the two speak to each other on the end of the call, voices just muffled enough to be indecipherable. Izuku squeezes his almond plush between his palms, trying to rein the panic surging onto his skin. Kurogiri is always helping Tomura from what Izuku has heard about him. He'll fix this. The scratching sound comes to a stop, and there are some shuffling noises before that same deep voice comes through Izuku's headphones. Tomura will be okay, Midoriya-kun. Thank you for being here with him. I know you must have been worried. Kurogiri speaks like he's talking to a child, and at any other time it would have been annoying. He had a rather troublesome night and morning. Izuku wipes the tears from his eyes, ignoring how they almost immediately replaced by more. I understand. Thank you, Kurogiri-san. Can you ask him to message me when he's feeling better? Of course. The man replies before the call cuts off. Tomura 4FNG 814. Call ended. 8 minutes. Tomura messages 3 days later, on the day Izuku dreads most every year. Tomura 4FNG 2011. Hey, sorry for putting you through that. I don't remember much of the call of the night, but Kurogiri said you seemed freaked out. Might Doria 2012. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't do anything to help you. Tomura 4FNG 2013. I shouldn't have made you call me. Might Doria 2013. It's fine. You needed help. Tomura 4FNG 2013. And you didn't need to be made to listen to me have a breakdown and scratch my neck to hell and back. Might Doria 2014. That's what that noise was? The scratching had been so loud, dry and raspy, and apparently nails against tender skin. Realization of why the noise had dulled, grown quieter, and less dry as Tomura made noises like he was in pain, makes it harder for Izuku to breathe. Tomura pops up as typing twice before anything comes through, and all Izuku can feel is guilt and worry. Tomura 4FNG 2014. Yeah. Might Doria 2017. Can we voice chat? Tomura 4FNG 2018. Incoming call. Might Doria 2018. Call accepted. I'm okay. Tomura assures almost immediately. Kurogiri patched me up after he ended the call. The soft tone contrasts the familiar grasping rasp of his voice, and the last layers of fear fall away. The fact that Tomura is, or will be okay, curl tight around Izuku's heart. He itches to ask what happened to distress his friend that badly, but Izuku bites his tongue. That's good. There's a small hum as Tomura agrees before the call falls silent. Izuku pulls up Wild Soul 3 and his most recent save file. He can't stand not doing anything on top of the quiet in that moment. Plus, he knows Tomura can probably hear the distinctive calming music that accompanies the game. His character pops up at the entrance of a crumbling building, vines twisting through broken windows and sunlight streaming in. Across the uneven ground are a series of faded pressure plates, and on each wall there's an incomplete diagram, marred by missing bits of stone. Do you want to talk about it? Izuku asks as he wanders the edges of the room, inspecting the diagrams. It's difficult to tell how the four images should overlap to fit the dimensions of the array of pressure plates. Not really. Izuku nods, even if his friend can't see him. Want me to screen share so you can help me with the Wild Soul puzzles? A small, childish part of Izuku hopes that thinking through them will help Tomura solve whatever it was he had been ranting about the other morning, before he had completely broken down, since he had related it to one of the more difficult puzzles in his explanation. But I can solve them faster, Tomura challenges, his voice cracking against laughter. The exasperation in Izuku's voice is not feigned. Says the guy who hasn't had the patience to beat a Wild Soul game since the first one came out. An offended noise comes through Izuku's headphones, and he has to struggle not to laugh. It's not my fault they did a shitty job on the sequels. And I'm assuming it's also not your fault that you're lazy and got bored of it? Izuku prodded. Tomura's answer is practically a hiss. Lies and slander. They manage to work through all the puzzles in the building and fix the download point at the building's peak before Izuku notices the time and can't help but sigh. His finger is still on his controller, and his character stops on their run from the completed building to one of the few he had only just gained the coordinates to. It's April 1st, and Izuku's third year of junior high starts in 8 hours. He drops his head back and lets out a long groan of annoyance. The clacking of Tomura's keyboard as he types something while waiting on Izuku to start the next puzzle pauses. You good, player 2? New school year starts in 8 hours, Izuku whines from where he's leaning back, holding his hands over his face. Absolutely disgusting. No thanks. Tomura deadpans over the call, and Izuku can't help but laugh. Maybe if we believed hard enough, your school would just disappear, player 2. That'd be nice. Without an audience, the way Izuku dramatically brushes a fake tear from his eye is wasted. One can only dream, he laments. The chuckle Tomura lets slip is quiet, and Izuku is hit with a wave of emotion. His chest feels tight and his hands stiff. Nearly 2 years of memories condensed into his bones. Tomura has been a near constant presence in his life for what feels like forever at this point. His only friend. He is sharply and suddenly unsure of where he'd be without the older teen's unique brand of support. Through her throat half closed up with emotion, and with the raw boldness that comes from staying up late with someone you love, Izuku manages to speak, breaking the comfortable silence that has fallen as he finishes guiding his character to a new puzzle. Hey Tomura, he whispered, because he's still not used to this, confiding in someone, having someone they can trust not to leave. You're a really good friend. A moment passes before Izuku can hear a muffled shit from Tomura, the hiss familiar in tone after hearing it so many times. Did you just accidentally dust something again because you were surprised by emotions? You have no proof that's what happened. Tomura huffs, the sound of things moving around quickly in the background. There's a clatter and another curse. Once the scramble finally dies down, Tomura sighs, sounding like the words are dragged out of him. You're a pretty great friend too, Izuku. The smile that stretches his face feels like it will tear Izuku in half, helped along by the light, buzzing joy in his chest. There are tears on his cheeks, and he's not sure when he started crying. Since you dusted something again, you owe me one question about your quirk. Izuku switches focus, because he knows Tomura struggles with moments of joy like this sometimes. Isn't sure what to do with them after so long without. It makes Izuku's heart ache. That wasn't the deal. Tomura's fake exasperation can't stop him. His notebook is already open and ready on his desk. Ignoring Wild Cell 3 for the moment, Izuku takes up his pencil. An important one today, Tomura. What is the elemental composition of the dust you make? From the pictures it looks uniform, but it should be impossible for it to be atomically uniform from use to use, because of the conservation of matter. If you can disintegrate anything and it does change the atomic structure, you could probably dispose of radioactive waste with a single touch, and... Tomura cuts him off before he can get any further into his rant. How the fuck am I supposed to know the atomic composition of the stuff I disintegrate on the top of my head, player 2? Chapter 4. This might as well happen. Life is already so goddamn weird. Tomura's voice, still the same rough and cracked thing it had been since they first spoke, comes through his headphones almost immediately after Izuku starts the call. Are you okay? His friend asks, flat tone edged with something like worry. And that's the question. Is Izuku okay? He isn't sure. His shoulder hurts where Kachan had held him in place, minuscule explosions popping against his uniform until they burnt the fabric and pressed against his skin. It doesn't hurt as much as his chest, though. Air doesn't want to fill his lungs properly, and his heart feels swollen behind his ribs, as though it's taking up too much space, freshly burst from all the hurt. Sort of, Izuku decides to reply, hoping Tomura won't dig too hard at the non-committal answer. His friend is unpredictable and abrasive, even worse than Izuku at being a good friend, too ignorant of how far is too far until he's reminded. Delving into the day's events, what Kachan had said just feels like it'll end with more stress and pain. Tomura doesn't speak for a few moments. If you say so, he concedes. How was school? That's a bit underhanded. Izuku can't help commenting. The dig for information about why Izuku isn't okay is so obvious, because school is never good. But it was alright. Not great, but nothing unusual. A lie? Because today was new. The proof of it, the soggy and burnt notebook in his backpack, and the hand-shaped burn on his shoulder that he'll have to do something with. Proof in how his hands are still shaking. His friend will get upset if he tells the truth, though, all righteous anger and cursing the dependency society has formed on heroes that leads him to only valuing those with strong quirks. It's his brand of protectiveness, which Izuku has learned to accept without arguing that even heroes he'd probably been treated by pretty much the same. Today, though, Izuku doesn't feel like he can listen. Too wound up and scared and devastated. He just needs his best friend to talk about arbitrary things in video games with him right now. Have you seen the new skins for Sunforce? He asks before Tomura can reply, forcing the subject away from himself. It helps that the new designs were cool, additional colours and patterns and options for their spaceship. They probably could have done more for patterns, but seeing the new customizable control consoles were the real highlight. Izuku is glad Tomura takes the distraction, even if they both know it for what it is. He takes a turn on his walk home, following the route on autopilot. I can't wait to test it out on multiplayer. You can take the controls for offensive measures and stuff, and I can grab the shields and collections. Like that one time. The shadow of the underpass he crosses under nearly every day falls over Izuku and relief fills him. He's only 5 more minutes away from home, where he can curl up in his room and do homework and play video games at Tomura and not think about his day. As always, as long as we get to kick Spaceface's ass, I'm down. Or we can play some of the True Hunt and narrate which enemies show up and their entire backstories. Izuku can't help laughing, trying to muffle it so it doesn't echo too harshly on the concrete walls. Once his laughter stops, there's quiet, only broken by the buzz of cars Izuku can barely hear over his headphones. Player 2? Tomura starts, voice a little quieter. What's that noise? What noise? His friend sounds worried, so Izuku starts pulling off one of his headphones from his ear. As he does, it hits him. The slow squelch and ooze of something moving behind him. It feels like there's suddenly ice in his spine. Izuku? Tomura starts, just as the ice in Izuku's spine and the fear of his gut peaks and he tries to run. Something wraps around his ankle and he hits the ground with a grunt of pain. It creeps up his leg with speed, consuming him. Izuku can hear Tomura yell his name, voice panicked and grating, and suddenly tears are in his eyes. The slime grabs him fully, and he can't cry with it covering him, trying to squirm into his body. He can't breathe. He doesn't want Tomura to hear him die. Through the sludge, he sees his phone black out, the connection to Tomura crackling and dying in his ears. Things happen. All Might tells him to be realistic and leaves him standing alone on that rooftop. Izuku would be lying if he said he didn't think about it, didn't stare down at the concrete below and almost heed Kachan's words. He wanted to call Tomura, to talk to him and remind himself that there are at least 2 people out there that care for him, and he knows Tomura cares for him, even if he hadn't quite believed it before he had heard his best friend yelling for him to be okay. But he couldn't call, because his phone died in that villain sludge. The concrete stared back at him. An explosion broke him out of his thoughts, tucking him down the stairs and through the streets until he was watching, running, sobbing, as he tries to save Kachan. Hands slipping through the sludge ineffectually. Then there is the walk home, Kachan stopping him and then All Might just after, offering something life-changing. In that moment, Izuku thinks of Tomura's hatred for the man, thinks about saying no. Then he thinks about himself, about how this is his hero. This is his chance to help people. He says yes. Many things happen that day. When he gets home, he pulls out an old pair of headphones and turns on his computer to message Tomura. My Doria, 6:23. I'm okay. I just got home, went to my computer. The villain destroyed my phone, but I'm okay. Tomura 4FNG, 6:25. Incoming call. My Doria, 6:25. Call accepted. I'm okay, are the first words Izuku can get out, and the rest are bubbling out after them like he's broken a dam. It was terrifying and the worst ending to a bad day, but I'm alive and didn't get any serious injuries. Tomura doesn't speak. I'm alive, Izuku whispers, and it almost feels like a lie, like he's dreaming this and he died in that tunnel. Tomura still listening to him struggle. Tomura? It really only hits him then that he almost died, drowning and alone, ripped away from the comfort of his best friend's voice in those last moments. The feeling of sludge in his lungs rises. Izuku feels, even as he breathes, as though he's drowning. Tomura's voice nearly makes the dam holding his tears back finally break. It's quiet and careful and raspy from use, from yelling. I'm glad you're all right, Izuku. He sounds like there's more he wants to say, but he doesn't continue. It makes Izuku think of Kurogiri, how the man is the only person Tomura has outside of a random 14-year-old who he had almost listened to die today. I'm sorry, he says, because he isn't sure what else to say. He isn't sure if he's apologizing for Tomura having to hear him drown, nearly abandoning the older teen to never know Izuku's fate, or taking on what's offered, but he's apologizing anyways. It feels right, though. Player 2. And Tomura's voice is different, still quiet but broken, not raspy from use, but from spending too long screaming after Izuku's phone had died, and is now only letting the mask drop. I was so scared, he whispers, like he's scared of being heard, like he thinks someone's watching him. I couldn't do anything to help you, and you were right there, he confesses. Something in Izuku cracks. Tomura's words are familiar. It's how he had felt when the older teen broke down over their call so long ago, panicked and frenzied. The feeling of inaction, of being too far away as you listen to someone you love suffer. Izuku drops his head to his desk, trying to stay calm. You made sure I wasn't alone, he assures. It would have been worse if I was alone. He can hear Tomura's breathing, and he knows Tomura can hear his. It's comforting, a reminder that they're alive. They sit in silence like that for a long time. It is Sunday, and that means Izuku has a day off from training so he can rest. It feels like falling behind, faltering, but it also means he gets to talk with Tomura, so he can stomach it for a day. The both of them have been busy the last 4 months, since Izuku was attacked and his life changed so drastically. He missed Tomura. Tomura 4FNG, 1147. Have you looked into Setrune? It's releasing in a few months. January, I think? Might Doria, 1148. Not really, frowny face. I haven't really had much time to look into or play anything recently, with getting ready for entrance exams and all. Tomura 4FNG, 1148. Want to call so I can tell you about it? Might Doria, 1148. Sure. Tomura 4FNG, 1149. Incoming call. Might Doria, 1149. Call accepted. Hey Tomura, Izuku greeted immediately. Sorry I haven't been able to be online since last Sunday. It's been a while, and the guilt eats at Izuku. Balancing training and getting to talk to Tomura is difficult. Makes Izuku feel panicked. The worry that Tomura will leave is so much fainter than it was a year ago, but it will never fully fade, and it tugs at him when he runs out of time or falls asleep too early. Missing Tomura hurts, but their lives are changing, and Izuku is just thankful that they have today and every other Sunday. No worries, player 2. I've been pretty busy too. You're not the only one changing things up these days. Tomura responds, voice crackling, and suddenly the loneliness hits. They haven't spoken in a week. Izuku hasn't spoken to someone sort of near his own age who didn't hate him in a whole week. It's almost surreal for how much it hurts. Even talking to All Might so often these days doesn't really help. Tell me about this Setrune game, Izuku says, staring at his ceiling. His headphones barely hanging on with how they stretch across the room. Hearing Tomura speak might help. So it doesn't look particularly original on most fronts, but the graphics are groundbreaking, and so are the movements and leveling mechanics. And he's off, describing where the game looks, though it may be stale or boring and what's been done right. The familiar rasp of Tomura's voice, growing a little more ragged the longer Tomura talks, though he doesn't seem to notice, sweeps away the mounting loneliness and fear. The second Monday of February, Izuku can barely focus when he wakes. There's just too much on his mind. Tomura had missed one of their Sunday calls for the first time, after months of the same routine, and hadn't texted Izuku at all since the Sunday before. Bonus, he had to finish moving the last few pieces of trash to the beach and pass the entrance exam without a quirk later in the day. Best Monday ever. In an effort to distract himself, Izuku slips his phone away and jogs to the beach. The sun's still at least 2 hours from rising. Lifting and pushing trash through the sand and up the stairs is a good distraction. It floods Izuku with exertion, pride, and relief, blocking out the worry. Then, he ends up eating a piece of All Might's hair. It's a better distraction than moving trash around, but the disgust of having eaten a piece of hair can't last forever. Izuku messages Tomura when he leaves the beach and All Might behind. Might Doria, 702. I hope you're okay, Tomura. It's been a week and I'm worried. Might Doria, 703. I didn't do anything, did I? Also, off topic, but I think I got my quirk. He doesn't really expect a reply. No matter how much he hopes, his phone will ping with a notification. None king. Might Doria, 712. I'm going to be away from my phone and computer till after the entrance exam. I know you hate heroes, but please wish me luck anyways. Smiley face. Ah! The realization of why Tomura has disappeared for the past week finally hits him. Izuku was kind of appalled it took him this long. He had just been so distracted by the mix of worry over the exam and Tomura and excitement about the slim chance he'll make it into UA. Chapter 5. If you're attacking my school and I'm panicking, then who's saving our friendship? Might Doria, 1751. I know you're not replying because it was UA and exams, but I thought I should tell you I didn't make it anyways, so you don't have to keep ignoring me. Even with the spontaneously developed quirk, I didn't get a single point in the practical exam. Plus, I shattered every bone in my arms and legs in the last few minutes, so that was great. Izuku sighs, sprawled across his bed, ignoring how his hair still dripped on his sheets from his shower. He flexes his hands, watching them move and comparing it to how terrible they looked after punching the 0-pointer. His phone pings from where he dropped it a few inches from his left hand. Tomura 4 FNG, 1757. What the fuck? What do you mean you shattered every bone in your arms and legs? How the fuck did you randomly get a quirk? I only ignored you for a week. How the fuck? Might Doria, 1758. Hell if I know. And the bones were from punching a robot bigger than any of the buildings in the testing area to death. I came out of the encounter only a little more functional than it. Tomura 4 FNG, 1759. Legally, I am now obligated to never leave you without supervision again. He tries to damp down his laughter, but Izuku can't help it. He'd missed Tomura. Even though the disappointment and heartbreak of failing so spectacularly in the practical exam, getting to message his friend again only brings relief. Tomura 4 FNG, 1759. I hate the idea of you going to UA, but I'm sorry you didn't do well in the exam. I know it was your dream. Might Doria, 1801. Thanks, Tomura. It's just disappointing. I trained really hard and prepared to take the test without a quirk, and even with one I still couldn't get any villain points. Tomura 4 FNG, 1802. I mean, most of those idiot brats have probably had their quirk for 10 years, and you've only had yours for a few days. It'd throw anyone off. Anyways, fuck yours besides you and maybe the Wild Wild Pussycats. Have you been able to get a hold of his set room? Might Doria, 1803. Nah, I've been too busy studying and training. Tell me about it? Izuku stares at the idling screen of the projector, frozen on its final frame of All Might's face. The hope that had been locked away right after the entrance exam has burst free violently. He feels so much, the skittering of excitement, the ache of relief, the bubble of joy choking him, swelling out from his chest and up his throat. He's going to UA. He's going to be a hero. Might Doria, 1417. Incoming call. Tomura 4 FNG, 1418. Call accepted. You're lucky I was about to message you, player 2. Tomura mutters as a greeting, the noise of him moving around just audible. Izuku can't stop smiling, can feel the expression in every inch of himself. Can I ask you a favor? He asks Tomura, because Tomura is his best friend. Through his headphones, he can hear Tomura's footsteps stop. It takes him a moment to reply. Sure thing, Izuku. Tomura's voice sounds a little worried, and if Izuku had any more brain power to process emotions with, he'd feel a little bad. Can you pretend that you don't hate heroes as much for 2 minutes? You don't have to pretend to love them or anything, but... Izuku takes a deep breath. I just want someone to be happy about this with. Just for a moment, without anything to make it something not to be proud of. And Izuku knows it's wrong of him to ask for Tomura to pretend the opposite of something that he has so much conviction about, but he wants to be happy. Not to worry about how broken society is, to be overwhelmed that he succeeded at something he thought he'd never had a chance at for so long. It takes him a few moments after he finishes asking to realize that his cheeks are already wet with tears. There's a huff across the line. I can do 1 minute. Tomura says, and Izuku can tell that only some of the reluctance is genuine. The tears are pouring now, and he isn't sure how he still has a grip on his breathing. I made it, Izuku whispers, still barely able to believe it. I'm in UA's hero course. Before Tomura can say anything, he keeps talking, unable to hold it back. I didn't get any villain points, but they gave me 60 rescue points for helping a girl about to be crushed by the 0-pointer. Izuku can't help trailing into a whisper again. I actually made it, Tomura. His friend doesn't speak for a moment. Is that the robot you pureed your arms and legs punching? Izuku rolls his eyes. It's almost like I only punched the one robot. Wow! He drops his phone on his bed and flops down after it, rolling to stare at the ceiling. He's still crying, but not as hard, the tears slowing down. They'll start up again soon, though, when he tells his mom. For now, though, Izuku feels calm. I'm proud of you, Izuku, Tomura says, and it makes Izuku pause. His voice sounded so genuine saying it, honest and full of conviction, and Izuku's heart feels like it's swelling and breaking all at once. It almost sounds like Tomura isn't pretending. You'll be an amazing hero one day. Middle school ends without notability. Kachan isn't subdued, but he also isn't violent, and his friends follow suit. Izuku graduates with just above average grades, steadily maintained and balanced to gain him access to schools like UA without drawing the ire of his teachers or peers. There is no fanfare beyond sitting with his mother at their dinner table, her happy tears slowing for the first time that day as they eat, and a message from Tomura afterwards, once Izuku is sat at his desk and scrawling down notes from the new video of Gang Aura posted earlier that day. Tomura 4FNG, 1802. Congrats on surviving hell. On to the next 3 levels, Izuku. Here's hoping you get to rub your success on all those assholes from your school's faces soon enough. And how much better you are in the faces of all your classmates at UA. Izuku slips his pen away and smiles. The past few weeks after the letter came, and Tomura hasn't ranted about his hatred for heroes, but they have talked about it. About the responsibility that comes with the power and notoriety high-ranking heroes get. The need for actual oversight and change within the system. It had been a series of long conversations, drawn out and analytical, and pointedly skipping over All Might because Izuku knows mentions of the hero get under Tomura's skin in the worst possible way. Eventually, they'd agreed that a lot was wrong, but at least some could be fixed, and Izuku had promised to try and enforce change, and drag his classmates into it with him if they actually ended up liking him. None of the conversations changed Tomura's pointed bitterness about heroes, though. It made it sort of comforting to know he'd always have a friend in Tomura, eyes so unwaveringly critical of the way hero society worked, to keep him from falling away from the reason he'd chosen to be a hero in the first place, away from helping people. Might Doria, 1803. I just hope my classmates won't hate me, honestly. And the teachers. And then I stop breaking my bones. Are we sure it was junior high that was hell? Are we sure it's not going to be high school? Tomura 4FNG, 1805. Positive. You'll be surrounded by do-gooders like you the whole school day. Guarantee you make at least 2 new friends on the first day. Might Doria, 1806. 2 friends in one go? After making only 1 in 10 years? Sounds fake. Tomura 4FNG, 1807. You're going to be the only pint-sized idiot there worth anything, and people will realize. Might Doria, 1807. I want to say thank you for the compliment, but you called me pint-sized. Also, this is sappy, but I graduated, so I'm entitled to sappiness. Thanks for being such a great friend, player 2. Smiley face. I don't know how I would have made it through the last 3 years without you. You're the best friend I've ever had. Izuku looks back to his notes. It'll take Tomura a little time to reply. He still has trouble being called a friend, in a similar way to how Izuku has trouble using the title. It's enough to know that Tomura has seen his message. The older teen states his friendship in other ways, so obvious after seeing them for years. Eventually, a notification comes in. Tomura 4FNG, 1813. Oh, so I'm player 2, huh? The great doors to the unforeseen simulation joint finish swinging open, and Izuku feels like he's going to vibrate out of his own skin. He isn't sure how none of his classmates have noticed his barely restrained amazement at everything going on. Beside him, Uraraka bounces on the balls of her feet, smiling wide and genuine. She grabs his arm, one pinky lifted, and shakes it a little, dramatically putting her whole body behind it. We're here, Deku-kun, we're here! Her excitement trails off sharply when she catches sight of the hero waiting for them. The force behind her, shaking his arm, grows even stronger. "That's 13!" she yells to him. Her energy feeds into his, and soon enough they're frantically whispering back and forth about the rescue hero. It feels good to talk about heroes like this with someone for the first time in longer than Izuku can remember. They both trail off to listen when 13 begins to tell the class more about the USJ and how and why they use the destructive power of their quirk to save people from natural disasters. And there is no warning when it happens, nothing to alert them or send them running for safety. There is only the faintest of odd smells in the air, the sound of feet on concrete, and then innumerable villains waiting for them in the USJ's central plaza. Time seems to stretch around them as the field trip falls apart. Everything feels as though it plays out in slow-mo. Aizawa leaps into the fray of villains. 13 is blocked by Kacchan and Kirishima, and the whole class is scattered. In the back of his head, as Izuku plummets toward the water, something in him underneath the fear and panic itches with familiarity. It feels like he knows the voice of the mist villain, just in the edges of his mind. Alongside it is a man covered in hands. The way he talks, from cadence and wording to the rasping sound of his voice, clicks against Izuku's mind, just off from fitting. He hits the water and forgets to dwell on it, too distracted by the converging water villains. It pops back up again after, once they're off the ship and riding high on success, watching just in case Aizawa needs them, just in case they need to be heroes just a little too early again. The villain, covered in hands, wraps all 5 fingers around Aizawa's elbow and holds him there. His countdown and commentary just audible where Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta are hiding. Alarm spikes down Izuku's spine when he realizes what's happening seconds before Aizawa blinks. The sleeve and skin and muscle begin to crumble away, floating on the air like dust. More than the sight, the realization makes Izuku sick, unable to process anything beyond 2 familiar voices and a quirk that disintegrates whatever its user touches. He knows, but something in his heart won't actually let him know. Izuku's already crying when the first crack of Aizawa's bones, shattered in the fist of the gnome who crouched above him, reaches him. His hands rise to grip his hair, and he barely keeps himself from tugging it. All he can feel is panic and denial, all of it wrapping tight bands over his lungs until he can't breathe. If he weren't already crouched down, nearly submerged in the water beside his classmates, he would have collapsed. There's a thought as Aizawa's face is slammed into the concrete, leaving a dent, dust rising from it. Izuku can see the blood, can barely breathe, air heavy in his lungs as he watches. Everything is wrong. And then it only gets worse, because the man made of mist, no, Izuku knows now, it's Kurogiri, the man who had saved his best friend when Izuku couldn't, greets the main villain, still covered in severed hands, eyes crazed and still watching Izuku's teacher get slowly crushed with something like glee, with a soft, Tomura Shigaraki. Izuku can't really hear beyond the fact that he knows people near him and far from him are talking. He stands and starts sobbing at some point. He thinks he's shaking. Nothing feels real enough to check it against, though. Vision too blurry and air rushing shallowly in and out of his steel-bound lungs as he hyperventilates. When he starts walking, Izuku stumbles, water splashing up around him as he stares ahead. Tomura, who he hasn't spoken to in 3 days beyond quick, unresponded to have a good day messages, looks somehow like a nightmare, and Izuku's chest burns. Izuku takes another step, and another, until he's at the water's edge, alone. He feels empty. All he can hear is the scratching, sharp nails against the dry neck, so familiar. All he can see is red, pooling beneath Aizawa and burning in Tomura's eyes and dripping down his neck and fingers. Tomura? Izuku asks, because he's terrified, and that's his best friend, even if he wants to run away from him right now, even if he's the one Izuku is terrified of. His voice cracks as he speaks, shatters. He tries to open his mouth to ask what's happening, why, but nothing happens. Nothing comes out, blocked by the sobs stuck in his throat. Izuku doesn't know what to do. He can still see Aizawa, crumpled beneath the gnome's hand. He can see Tomura's eyes widen behind the severed hands, the same red as Aizawa's blood. His nails stop scraping across his neck. Everything is so still, like a painting, the image of tragedy captured in a moment. Tomura stumbles a step back, bumping just slightly into Kurogiri, and Izuku can see how his mouth opens, like he wants to speak too, and can't find the words. From a few yards away, Aizawa groans and he shifts to breathe the sound pained and wet. It clears the fog from Izuku's mind in one fell swoop, caring about how this now might get his teacher killed. He looks at Tomura for one moment more, just staring, unable to find anything to say, and then he's running, straight at the Nomu and Aizawa, trusting that as much as he's terrified of Tomura right now, his best friend can't kill him. Sliding to a stop on the concrete, tears through the skin of Izuku's knees. He raises his hand to check over Aizawa, frantic and unsure, and as soon as he gets within 10 centimeters of the Nomu, it's gone. Izuku doesn't look for where it went, too busy trying to stop the blood pouring from his teacher's arms and face. He hears a portal behind him close, and he hopes it took Tomura with it. Beneath his fingers, Aizawa's pulse is steady but even. Tsuyu and Mineta don't ask him any questions afterwards. His statement to the police, briefly mentioning that he recognized Tomura as an estranged friend, is close enough to the truth to not feel like a lie. It doesn't alleviate the sick feeling in his gut, nor does it get rid of the squinted, calculating gaze of his nearly unconscious teacher, so he isn't really sure why he doesn't tell the truth. Izuku also isn't sure how Aizawa is still aware enough to spot him and remember that Izuku knew the villain's name. He's also surprised that the underground hero hasn't already been dragged away in an ambulance after 13. Turning away, he heads towards the bus, where his classmates, who have already given a statement, have gathered. Once he arrives, Uraraka gives him a hug, tight and overwhelming. He can feel the vibrations of a flood of notifications buzzing away on his phone, and, ducking his head as he tries and fails not to cry again, Izuku pointedly ignores them. Just as he ignores the bite in his throat and how he still feels like there are bands around his lungs, just as how he ignores how his chest feels empty, lonely. Izuku only lets himself hear the loud, angry sound from Kachan talking to Kirishima, and Ida's stiff formalities to the police officer taking a statement. Only feels the grounding weight of Ochako's hug. He can think about Tomura later, when he knows Aizawa will live and his classmates will be okay. Chapter 6 Extra. Should cats be allowed to vote? I think Tomura might be in trouble, Midoriya tells him once they're both in Shota's office and the door is closed firmly behind them. The kid looks terrible, with deep, dark circles beneath his eyes and greasy hair, and his tie knotted even more lopsided than usual. Apparently, the last 3 days of idly waiting for UA to open back up took their toll on his nerves. And beyond that, beyond the exhaustion, Midoriya seems scared, unsure, wary like he sees an enemy in Shota. It's a familiar look, one Shota recognizes from when he was young. It makes his teeth clench with buried anger. Then the name clicks. Shigaraki. Midoriya stares for a moment before nodding. I don't... He stutters to a stop before continuing firmly. He wouldn't have done that without someone convincing him to. Tomura hates heroes and All Might a lot, but since I got into UA, when we talked about it, he'd been less angry about them. Plus, he knew I was in the hero course. He's smart enough to know there was a chance it'd be my class he was attacking, and they had planned to work around it or use my presence. But he didn't. He trails off, biting his lip, fingers twisting together anxiously. He hasn't moved from his tentative position near the door. Shota watches him carefully. Midoriya is obviously distressed, worried and scared and closed off all at once. But Shota also remembers his expression when the villain had first shown up. The surprise and fear. And he remembers his expression when his student had whispered the villain's first name. He remembers squinting through the pain, barely able to move, and seeing the devastation and terror on Midoriya's face. Then the tears start to fall, and Midoriya's shoulders start to shake. The moment's devastation still hasn't faded from his eyes. I don't know what to do, he says, through sobs. Still standing halfway between the door and desk, hunched and wary. I want to talk to him, but he tried to kill us. He was my only friend for years. Shota had not been prepared to deal with this today. Carefully, as to not spook the kid, he stands and rounds the desk. His student doesn't exactly relax when Shota puts a hand on his shoulder, but something about him loosens, like he isn't expecting to be yelled at any moment now. He doesn't understand why the kid acts the way he does, so unlike any other kid with a quirk as strong as his that Shota has ever met. But it doesn't make the behavior new or unfamiliar, and not knowing the route doesn't mean he can't help. You're in a difficult position, Shota tells the kid, because it's true.
Your friend has done something terrible, not just to you, but to others in front of you. Midoriya's eyes flicked nervously and blatantly between Shota's still bandaged elbow and face. But that doesn't erase him being your best friend and only friend for years, one who you feel may or may not be beyond your help right now. He watches how Midoriya curls further and further in on himself. Knowing this might be a mistake, a misstep, doesn't stop him. He can't make himself tell the boy to let go of his best friend. Shota, when he isn't focused on being logical, is a sentimental fool, one who lost his own best friend too early and too harshly. It is difficult, he reaffirms, trying to gauge how much Midoriya relaxes with the statement. It isn't much. And choices like these weigh on heroes often. You can cut all contact if it feels safer to you. You can continue talking to Shigaraki and either convince him to stop or get enough information to pass on to the police. Each option has its pros and cons, but it'll ultimately be your choice, Midoriya. No one else can make it for you. I would like you to inform me of your decision, though, so I can keep you safe as you go through this. There is still distrust in the kid's expression, but also curiosity, and Shota figures it's the closest he'll get to being in the positive with the kid right now. Broken trust like this takes longer than a few weeks to heal. Midoriya hasn't pulled away from the hand Shota placed on his shoulder, though, so there's probably a chance it'll work out. The kid blinks hard, tilts his head down. I don't know what to do, he whispers, and then he slumps into the chair in front of Shota's desk and his head dips forward, cradled in his hands. Shota understands and chooses to watch. He can't quite make out the words tumbling from the student, but he can tell Midoriya is trying to reason out the options within himself. When his voice trails off, Midoriya looks up at Shota warily. Would you? He stops, breath hitching with more tears, eyes hardening behind the dampness like he's expecting a no. Before I make a decision, would you be there when I read some of the messages he sent after the USJ? I've been too scared to read through them on my own, and I think it'd help me choose to know what he said after. The tears aren't a surprise 2 days later, when Shota finally calls Midoriya into the same office, and they begin scrolling through the last 6 days of messages from Shigaraki Tomura. They were expected. In the short time he's known Midoriya, the kid has shown a propensity for tears that Shota has never seen rivaled. What wasn't expected was how frantic Shigaraki's messages seemed to be. Like he was terrified for Midoriya, worried for a friend in an odd way, scared that he'd lost Midoriya's trust and friendship in one strike, while also worried himself over what he'd done. It was a dichotomy Shota rarely saw, and one that made him dread what he was quickly realizing about the kid's friend. Midoriya slid the phone across the desk and put his head down as soon as Shota took it. He had scrolled down to the latest messages Shigaraki had sent, all from around 3 in the morning, just a few hours ago. Tomura 4FNG, 2:58. I tried to convince him, but he said it had to be then. Why did it have to be then? I'm sorry, Izuku. He has other plans, but I can't. My neck feels like it's burning, but I can't find Kurogiri. Everything goes wrong again, Blair 2. Oh. Tomura 4FNG, 3:21. I shouldn't text you. I tried to kill you, Izuku. What the fuck? Shit. Kurogiri won't answer me, but why would you want to talk to me now? He did this, but I didn't. I'm sorry. Change to Harbor the Present by nolov louscr. Summary. The pain and the incessant itch felt distant, like cruel palms laid across a burning throat, like Izuku telling him that he'd help as the world pressed in like a noose. The trapped feeling is still there, though Tomura wishes Izuku had chased it off forever in one go. He feels stifled by Sensei's thumb, by the knowledge that things would have been fine if his savior had just trusted him instead of treating him like a child. He does not feel cornered by his memories of Eraserhead, desperate and bleeding to protect Izuku's class, the picture of a hero. Chapter 1. Do your hands remember? The attack on the USJ happened, and Tomura tries his best to just not think about it. In a half-formed way, in the way that things are too foggy and blend into one when you are too close, he knows he's experienced a lot of terrible things. He knows people died, that he witnessed their bodies, and that Sensei, as much as he saved Tomura, terrifies him enough to send ice crawling through his veins and to spark phantom pains along his hands. He knows that he was not born angry or bloodstained or bitter, but somehow that day feels like his worst. It seems that as quickly and as solidly he had gained a companion in Izuku, in some of the only laughter Tomura had ever experienced. He had lost it. And as much as he wants to fan anger to life in his own chest, because that's always been the answer, his rage and fury crackling and razor sharp beneath his skin, there is only the regret and the knowledge that Izuku isn't at fault. The more he tries not to think about the absence of his computer's notification, the more the silence distracts him. He can't even bring himself to look at any of the games he's downloaded recently, all the ones he had already played with Izuku or had been waiting for the chance to. It hurts in a new way. There isn't a time in the last few years that Izuku had ignored him, no matter how often Tomura had done so to the younger boy. It still baffles him how genuinely a good person can be when he thinks of Izuku, who never turned all the sights Tomura pulled against him back around. Knowing that this is what Izuku endured whenever he decided to be petty and disappeared burns deep in Tomura's chest. Missing someone, he finds, hurts much differently than any of Sensei's mind games. Nothing changes when he squeezes his eyes shut, colours flashing behind his lids, and nothing changes when blood begins dripping from his neck, torn skin and red buried beneath his nails. Tomura blinks at his own hands, and the memories of dusting his keyboard in the middle of a game with them as he talked to Izuku. The pain and the incessant itch feel distant, like cool palms laid across a burning throat, like Izuku telling him that he'd help as the world pressed in like a noose. The trapped feeling is still there, though. He wishes Izuku had chased it off forever in one go. He feels stifled beneath Sensei's thumb by the knowledge that things would have been fine if his savior had just trusted him instead of treating him like a child. He does not feel cornered by the memories of Eraserhead, desperate and bleeding to protect Izuku's class. The picture of a hero. Tomura hates heroes, every single one of them aside from Izuku, and he can't allow that to change. He isn't sure what would happen if he did. Kurogiri's knock on his door is familiar. Aside from Sensei's presence, it is one of Tomura's earliest memories clear enough to recall. When the door swings open, the man's yellow eyes draw together slightly, obviously concerned. Kurogiri, for as much as he doesn't have to express himself with, is surprisingly easy to read. Tomura rolls across his bed to face away from him, digging his nails into the meat of his crossed arms. He knows that the man can see his phone open to the chat he has with Izuku, flooded with only messages from Tomura, and hopes it'll be ignored. It's been a week of waiting, and any hope Tomura has of salvaging the only friendship he had ever formed seems lost. He does a good job of distracting himself from that, though. He's busy with planning and trying to live up to Sensei's expectations and goals. It's hard to remember that they're his goals too right now, but he's sure everything will go back to normal soon. The only time that the pain of loss catches up with him is in moments like now, when he's run out of thoughts for the day and is left with nothing but some new, harsher emptiness within himself. The bed dips behind Tomura, and he stares pointedly at the dull wall his bed is pushed up against. He doesn't know how Kurogiri's body interacts with objects, but he can recognize the presence of the person who practically raised him. A misty hand settles against where Tomura can feel his nails almost breaking through his own skin. You are allowed to have emotions beyond anger, Tomura, Kurogiri tells him, wavering hand lifting his fingers one by one. I find no need to inform Sensei on your progress in everything. The insinuation makes Tomura run both hot and cold, anger and relief singing across his bones. He wants to snarl at the man's betrayal to Sensei, to flex his hands and reduce Kurogiri to ash. He wants to turn and cry into Kurogiri's nice jacket, to embrace the sliver of freedom he's offering. Instead, Tomura doesn't move an inch, barely even breathing. The inaction feels like admitting defeat, weakness, but Tomura doesn't let it twist him. He can replay a moment like this as many times as he needs to find that answer. Kurogiri is a patient man, after all. The hand draws away after a few long moments, and Tomura does not lean to try and follow it. Do not forget your meeting with Guran tomorrow, Tomura. The meeting with Guran runs long, and Tomura barely restrains himself from using his quirk on the broker to speed things up. It really shouldn't be that hard to pick up some recruits. It'll be easier soon, though, he reminds himself. He has a plan. He does, right? Tomura remembers thinking of it, sort of. It has to be his. How else would he know it? It is Tomura's plan. The Nomura are ready, and they'll pinpoint the hero killer soon enough, so it's only a matter of waiting. A few more weeks, and they'll be one level closer to taking down All Might. For now, Tomura rests his head on the cool surface of the bar as Kurogiri wanders behind it, shutting the warp gate to the room center that they both entered through. Tomura tilts his head to the side so he can check his phone without lifting his head. There is a new notification from during the meeting, on an app he hadn't opened since the day before. The realization when he reads who it's from makes his breath stall in his lungs, hope shooting its way to life. Mike Doria, 1713. Tell me about whatever game you're playing. Don't voice call. It's barely anything. It isn't forgiveness, Tomura doubts will ever come. It isn't a rejection. It doesn't acknowledge any of the multitudes of messages Tomura had sent. But it's something. He can feel Kurogiri watching him, warm and familiar in the way he only is when he says things that tear Tomura in two different directions, but the man does not speak. When Tomura wipes harshly at the rough skin around his eyes, Kurogiri slides him a glass of water. Chapter 2. Rings through the chest. Izuku's replies are slow now, hesitant. It feels like coals in Tomura's throat every time the banner that signals Izuku's typing appears and disappears before leaving him without an answer for hours. They don't voice chat. But, as Tomura has reminded himself so many times since Izuku's first text after the attack, something is better than nothing, even if every message makes his stomach curdle with regret. He's at his computer when his impatience outweighs his guilt, and he clicks over from the dull, urban streets of Gridlock and into his chat with Izuku. The string of grey-blue boxes stare back at him, reminders of his mistake. The cursor blinks at the bottom of the screen. Tomura 4th NG. 309. Have a good day, Izuku. Tomura sends it, another grey-blue box to join the rest, waiting to be replied to when Izuku feels like it. Then he realized what exactly he's typed. It had been tradition for the last one of them asleep to send, so at least one of them would wake up to the kind wishes in the morning. It had been the last thing Izuku texted him before the attack, when he had been too busy preparing to check his messages. Clicking back to Gridlock and unpausing feels like moving through molasses, dragging at his joints. The game sucks, plain and simple, but it's the closest he can get to playing Vetamas without feeling like he's added another betrayal to the list. He dies almost instantly because he's so distracted, some NPC coming up from an alley and downing him with a knife. Beneath his hands, the controller crumbles, its dust slipping through his fingers. It's gritty, as it always is, and Tomura isn't sure if it makes him feel more or less itchy. It sticks to him where his hands are sweaty from the tight grip he'd had on the plastic, and it feels like blood soaking his hands when he's decayed flesh. It feels like his hands had as Izuku stared at him, eyes wide and terrified, stained with the Eraserhead's blood. It's a reminder of why he's still awake despite his exhaustion. Fear is what Tomura has known alongside anger for his whole life. He hates it. He wants to tear it from under his skin and shove it back in Sensei's face. Tell the man that his words hold no weight. Yet, even just standing in the bar, seated before the ratty old TV Sensei is speaking through, Tomura feels like he might die if he so much as moves. All he can think of, as his savior speaks, are sharp, too vivid dreams of learning exactly what his quirk felt like crackling across his skin. Exactly what dying felt like, only to be dragged back from the brink, kicking and screaming. In the background of every one of the nightmares, Sensei looms. And they have to be dreams. He remembers them being dreams. Sensei saved him after all. You need to begin to enact your plan, Tomura. I can't allow you to delay any further after your previous failure. All for One says, don't let the generosity I've shown be giving you as many chances as you need to go to waste. Tomura stares at the flickering screen, eyes wide. He does not stutter when he speaks. He knows better. Of course not, Sensei, he replies, and he takes some comfort in the sound of Kurogiri shifting behind him ever so slightly. I won't let you down again. It's a promise, because for as much as Tomura fears the man, he owes him everything. All for One makes a noise that is almost a hum, and Tomura's throat closes up. See to it that you don't, echoes from the speakers like a death sentence, and then the TV switches off, the call disconnected. Tomura does not look away, rooted to the spot. Every part of him itches, but he can't bring himself to lift his arms and chase the sensation away. Every thought grinds against his brain like sandpaper, and his vision has gone blurry. Every second feels like an age as the room spins around him. Something deep in his chest is sure Sensei is going to kill him if he fails again. Despite his reassurances, deem him useless and harvest the only thing worthwhile from his corpse. Decay. He tries to imagine what he would do if that happened, and can only see himself frozen in abject terror. There is a shuffle behind him, and something cool presses against his neck, snapping him right back into awareness, gaze finally darting away from the silent TV. Kurogiri has draped a damp washcloth around his neck, right up against the itchiest spots. He isn't sure how Kurogiri knew he needed to snap back into himself and refrain from drawing blood, but he doesn't question it. It does make something in him twist, and release in a way he hasn't felt in a long time, though. It takes him until the end of the day to realize Kurogiri's actions have made him feel safe. As soon as this hits, Tomura's phone is in his hand. He takes a second to say the right words, a ritual he is only beginning to get used to. Not being able to talk freely with Izuku anymore stings, but not hurting him anymore feels like something good to strive for, like repentance. Tomura 4FNG, 903. What do you do when you realize someone makes you feel safe? Also, if Kurogiri finds out about this, you're not on my team next time I play Vetamas. The reply comes so quickly that Tomura can only sit for a moment, too excited to do much else. It feels like coming home. Might Doria 905. Ah, you've acquired a dad. Congratulations. Tomura 4FNG, 912. No. If anyone would be my dad, it would be Sensei. Might Doria 914. Unsure face. Does he make you feel safe? He isn't your dad, Tomura. Probably more like a leech or a spider. He makes you do terrible things, upsets you. Does Kurogiri? A split second of rage flashes through Tomura at his best friend's words, festering tight in his chest alongside his fear. He can't say that about Sensei. It's not true. Sensei cares for him, watches over him. Tomura's arms itch. Might Doria, 1948. Can we voice chat in an hour? I'm gonna be bored when I finish homework. The message comes in, and Tomura almost chokes on his glass of water in his rush to finish it and sprint to his room, not even bothering to explain his haste to Kurogiri. It doesn't even matter that there's still an hour before Izuku might call. Tomura 4FNG, 1948. Of course, call whenever and I'll answer player 2. After, Izuku's name pops up as typing twice before he goes offline, and Tomura sets himself to staring resolutely at the computer's clock. Each minute seems to span an hour as he does so. He doesn't even react when Kurogiri knocks on his still open door, nor when he hears the man slowly make his way over to where Tomura is seated on his desk chair. Are you all right, Tomura? Kurogiri asks. Without looking away from his screen, Tomura nods. Izuku messaged saying he'd call after he finishes homework. The man behind him makes a small noise of acknowledgement before falling silent, weight shifting as though unsure. Finally, Kurogiri clears his throat stiffly and says, I'm glad you'll be able to speak with him again. There is a short, tense pause before he continues. I believe outside perspectives can be very enlightening. Kurogiri's hand, wispy and faint, lands on Tomura's shoulder for a moment then. Caught off guard, he jerks involuntarily, instinctual fear taking over before Kurogiri squeezes slightly and is gone. Something in Tomura's chest loosens with the touch, even as that fear stays stuck in his throat. The next hour is spent idly staring at his screen, tapping through levels of Bomb Squad that he's already beaten on his second monitor as he waits. Just as he hits a level he's never done before and gets tripped up, causing the bomb he'd been defusing to run out of time and detonate, Izuku calls. Might Doria, 2102. Incoming call. Tomura 4FNG, 2102. Call accepted. Neither of them speak for a few moments, and Tomura's lungs feel completely empty of air. Then, breaking the white noise, Izuku mumbles out a cracked, Hey. And Tomura can breathe again. Hey, player 2. And he is reminded that is not the same, because there is so much he wants to say but doesn't have the courage to. It's okay though. The tiny laugh Izuku lets out feels like hope. Do I hear the Bomb Squad film music over there, Tomura? He asks, voice a weird mix of hesitant and teasing. Tomura lets out a fake scoff, minimizing the game to stop the sound from leaking over. BS, you know I'm way too good at puzzle games to fail a bomb squad of all things. Izuku makes a noise of doubt, and Tomura laughs this time, trying to muffle it. The lulling conversation stretches, and Tomura knows it's because Izuku isn't sure what is a safe topic. Tomura isn't either. Finally, he settles on saying, "The sports festival's coming up, right?" And it immediately feels like the right choice. "Yeah," Izuku says excitedly. "I'm so excited to participate, especially against all the other students. Everyone's so strong and motivated. Training has really brought everyone together last week." He trails off for a second, obviously not done, but unsure. "Tomura, would you watch?" Another moment of silence before Izuku seems to steel himself. "And not for any other reason than to watch me. You were the first person to believe in me, and I..." A thick pause, heavy and terrible, and Tomura hates it. "I don't know, just... please?" "Of course," Tomura says without hesitating. Sensei has never trusted him to analyze the sports festival before, so not badgering the man about entertaining his thoughts on it for a year should come as a relief for him, while allowing Tomura a moment of freedom to be there for Izuku, to make up in some small part for his mistake. The thought reminds him of something, and guilt rolls again through him. Tomura has more than one regret clinging to him from the USJ. "Hey, Izuku, I know you probably don't want to tell me about it, or don't feel safe telling me, but..." The question catches in his throat, making it hard to breathe and swallow and think. "Is Eraserhead okay?" There is a soft, "Oh," from Izuku's line and some stammering before he finally manages to say, "He's doing better now, still in cast, but he's able to take some of the bandages off." It's weird how much the news makes Tomura's heart sink. He hates heroes, had done what should have been right at the USJ, but Eraserhead's staunch defense of his students snags against Tomura's conscience every time he recalls the man's expression as he fought. They sit in silence again for a while, until the angry catch in Tomura's throat snaps and he finds himself crying. He can't remember the last time he cried. It burns through him like fire, pressure building behind his eyes as he chokes on his own breath. "I'm sorry, Izuku," he manages to squeeze out, and then he can't breathe, and can only barely feel his nails against the thin skin at his neck. "I know, Tomura," he hears Izuku whisper. "I believe you." Chapter 3. Am I enough yet? Tomura forced Kurogiri to join him in his room to watch the sports festival, and being together in such a small space for so long is beginning to grow cramped already. It makes his skin crawl and itch, but Tomura is terrified that he'll have to walk away from where they're streaming the live feed to his computer to patch up his neck again. And they can't watch in the open space of the bar, not when that clunky old TV is out there, full of static and watchfulness, not when he might be seen watching Izuku, be seen cheering for his friend. Even here, 4 rooms away, Tomura feels as if the man behind the screen is watching him. Kurogiri hands him a bottle of water as President Mike's grating voice begins crackling through the speakers, and Izuku's class walks out onto the empty field. It's easy to pick out the green head of hair he's only seen once, and as soon as he does, it seems like Izuku is looking right into the camera, right at Tomura, smiling softly. Then his attention is dragged away by one of his classmates flanking him, and for a split second he can't help but smiling back, even knowing Izuku will not see. After that, Tomura doesn't pay too close attention to the opening ceremonies. He has no care for the other classes, and he has to conserve his energy to be able to endure President Mike's volume. There is a twinge of anger when the brat who apparently got first place at the entrance exam ends up on the podium and spouts some bullshit about winning. But then the students are lining up for the obstacle course, and Tomura forgets about his rage in favor of excitement. Nothing huge happens at first. It's interesting to watch the sports festival, with all the quirks on display and put to use in unique ways, but Tomura can't see where Izuku is in the crowd of his peers, and it grates at his nerves. Plus, he had promised he'd only watch to support Izuku, and had made Kurogiri agree to the terms as well. Then, Izuku makes himself known on the minefield, and Tomura's jaw drops before he accidentally decays his gloves and half of his computer turn in an instant. Izuku is flying. He is propelled by an enormous puff of pink smoke, and he is clutching a piece of one of the robots like his life depends on it, though, so Tomura amends that Izuku is falling. Behind him, he can hear Kurogiri let out a quiet, "Oh!" and has to agree. Except, apparently, Tomura's best friend is not done, because as he loses speed, drops from the sky, he twists and twists and rolls, slamming the metal in between the two front runners. The subsequent explosion sends the other two boys stumbling, and Izuku barreling over the last of the mines and into the final stretch. "Holy shit!" Tomura whispers, grabbing his phone carefully as his best friend sprints back into the stadium in first place. "What the fuck?" Tomura 4FNG 1252. "What the fuck? Izuku, what the fuck? Why?" "I cannot believe you just decided time to fly like it was nothing. But also, congratulations, player 2. Holy shit." Tomura drops his phone time to see that Izuku has been assigned 10 million points for being in first place, and can't help laughing, muffled by habit. He isn't alone. It's hard to remember, but Tomura doesn't think he's ever been on the edge of his seat like this for the sports festival as they start the second round. Attention wrapped on the action as Izuku flies stalwart over his competition until the last few moments. It's fascinating to watch how his team moves so fluidly, in sync. It makes Tomura want to work alongside his friend too, even as the thought sours in his chest like something rotten. Izuku may one day become a great hero, but he will still be a hero. Tomura, in the back of his mind, feels as though his convictions are frayed hope between his fingers, and he does not know when their strength was drained away. He holds on to them desperately and hopelessly. It's the only thing that feels real sometimes. He can feel Kurogiri watching him as the break starts, yellow eyes flickering, and Tomura wants to bare his teeth at the man. He doesn't though, because Izuku has moved into the third round of the sports festival, and for now that is all Tomura will let himself worry about. The fear can come later, with the doubt and questioning that will be washed away as it always is. Nothing is wrong. My Doria 1401. Winking face. It's the skills, but thank you, I have absolutely no idea what's going on anymore. I really thought we were out at the end. I've flown more today than I ever have in my life. Tomura 4FNG 1402. I think what you've been up to qualifies more as falling, but for real, you're doing amazing. Win or lose, though, you undoubtedly left an impression. Mike Doria 1404. Thanks, Tomura. That really does mean a lot. I don't want to let everyone believing in me down. Ah, shit, I gotta go. A classmate needs to talk to me? I'll message you either afterwards or between matches. Tomura 4FNG 1406. I don't think you could let us down if you tried, Izuku. I'm sure anyone else would agree. From behind him, Kurogiri clears his throat. Tomura turns and can't help staring. There is something off about the man he's known for so many years. It's impossible to tell of his eyes or the swirling of his body, but something is wrong with Kurogiri. He looks trapped, beyond the stark expression of loss and the heavy press of hands against his nice slacks, like he's trying and failing to hold his fragile form together. Tell your friend I said good luck, the man says, looking at Tomura imploringly. The age-old war in Tomura's chest flickers with confused, undirect anger snarling in his veins. Then it settles because this is Kurogiri, who is safe. Tomura can't tear his eyes away from the screen. He thought it had been bad when Izuku broke his fingers to slip out of a gen at a kid's quirk. This was something else. Him and the Todoroki kid weren't holding anything back. The field was coated in ice, and some of Izuku's fingers were bruised and others broken, but Tomura could see his best friend yelling, eyes alight with something unfamiliar, injured fists clenched together. Then the Todoroki boy lit up with fire, and Tomura could see Izuku smiling through the flames, wide and overjoyed. The expression cuts down the rising anger in his chest that had grown up and up during the fight like weeds seeking to choke him. Flames look over ice, and Izuku rears his arm back, and the boom that follows shakes the camera, even as Cementos throws up a wall after wall between the two boys. Tomura just sighs and drops his head back, wondering why he's even surprised at this point as his best friend's loss is announced. 2 minutes into the next round, which Tomura barely bothers to watch, a message comes in. My Doria, 1517. Hey, did I do the right thing? Tomura 4FNG, 1518. What do you mean? You did great, but... My Doria, 1521. I made Todoroki use his fire. He didn't want to before. I basically sabotaged myself. Tomura 4FNG, 1522. That kid's dumb as rocks. Why wouldn't he use half of his OP quirk? But you were trying to help him, Mr. Hero, ugh. My Doria, 1523. Chill, drama queen. But I guess, yeah, not using it was hurting him. Tomura 4FNG, 1523. Then there. People who need saving don't always realize they want it. Like, fuck, never mind. There is so much pressure oozing from the television in the corner. Tomura could choke on it. Die stifled and controlled by fear. Instead, he is trapped, pinned beneath the weight of the hero killer, and by two swords that are much more likely to kill him than his fear. The man who Sensei thinks he needs, who Sensei thinks he is too weak without. And he knows Sensei is still listening. Sensei is the one who orchestrated this meeting that hurts, where the swords have sliced through his muscles of his shoulder, and what feels like nearly to the bone. It hurts, and all Tomura can think, like poison sinking into his mind, is that he wants so desperately to be saved. He doesn't want to be scared and hurt and small, something Sensei can steer around like a limp ragdoll. He wants to be alive. Tomura doesn't want to die. It hurts, and he knows Sensei or the hero killer or Kuroguri or even he is saying something, but none of that matters. He can't hear through the clashing in his mind. And if it's himself speaking, Tomura knows it's okay, because he knows even subconsciously he is too scared to say anything Sensei doesn't want. When Stain finally leaves, the decayed rust of his blade stays smeared across Tomura and stinging against his wound. There is no relief. Sensei is still watching, as he always is. He does not speak as Kurogiri patches him up, does not speak until Tomura leaves the room to rest. Behind him, he can hear Kurogiri's careful words and the croaking rasp of All for One. And Tomura wonders if what he feels about All Might can truly be called hatred. In comparison to what he feels right now, it seems paltry and weak-willed. When he enters his room, he knows he will not find rest, so instead he paces his cage and desperately tries to claw his stubborn rage into a shape that resembles safety. Chapter 4. The Night Sky Waits. You have to go soon, right? Tomura asks, because it is nearly 1 in the morning and Izuku has said he has a test tomorrow at the beginning of their call. There is a thunk across the line and a long, annoyed groan. I want to finish our run-through of Alterra Zone, though. It's my favorite in Ingress. They've been playing this zone for nearly 3 hours. They are nowhere near finishing it. That'll leave you with literally no sleep for your oh so important test, Player 2. Their two main characters run into another group of mechanical enemies on the screen. It doesn't look like a fight they'll win easily, but it shouldn't kill them. Alterra is a ridiculously good zone to run for leveling up, and they've definitely gained some ground. Izuku's character brandished the pickaxe he wields and charged. I don't want to sleep, though, Tomura's best friend groaned. I've been getting weird dreams since I stopped insta-breaking my bones with my quirk. A swing of the pickaxe tore through 3 robots, and Tomura made his character lob an acid bomb to the back of the mob. Looked like you were still breaking your bones 3 days ago when you wrecked your hand on that ice kid. Tomura could feel Izuku's glare through the computer. My fingers only started breaking after I was doing 2 attacks at them. Eraserhead helped me figure out how not to instantly shatter them like I did before. Recovery Girl even said that I did a good job at not mangling my hands completely. I think that was sarcasm over you mangling your hands in the first place, Izuku. There were only a few mechanical enemies left when Izuku grumbled out a dejected, whatever. The encounter ended and they were off, traveling to the biggest zone in the game, picking over ruins and steaming piles of machinery. Aside from your dreams, why don't you want to sleep? Tomura asks carefully. He still isn't great at reading Izuku, even after so long, but he thinks he's right about this. Izuku seems more nervous and exhausted and irritated with his dreams. Well, Izuku starts slowly, and Tomura can practically see the nervous grin he'd wear. We're starting internships soon, and I'm really nervous about them. One of my teachers suggested someone to me who I'll probably go with, but I don't know much about him. But no one else really wants me since I was so reckless in the sports festival. Tomura clamps down the part of himself that snaps and snarls at even the thought of heroes. This is Izuku. Izuku who can feel like a person with for a few hours. Izuku who will be a good hero. Izuku who is safe in a way little else is. I think you leaned past reckless into terrifying in the last match, Player 2. But go with your gut. Whoever you think will give you the best week of experience should be your first choice. They sit silently for a moment. Their characters are probably attracting a lot of attention standing out in the open, which won't be great later, but it's okay. Thank you, Tomura. I think that made my choice for me. Izuku's voice is light and gentle. Tomura leans back, stretches, and tries not to grin too wide between happiness and the feeling of freedom he has when he gets to talk to Izuku like this. Good. Now I'm going to go to sleep since I don't have a test tomorrow. I'd like to sleep in. Tomura pauses and saves, clicking out of the game as Izuku makes several loud and varied protests, insisting they keep playing. No can do, Izuku. I'm just so sleepy. There's a loud huff across the line. You're an ass. Izuku grumbles and ends the call. Night Doria, 103. Call ended. 5 hours. Night Doria, 21:15. I'm going to die here. The old man tried to give me a heart attack by playing dead and then put me through the ringer. I'm going to fall asleep in the middle of texting you, by the way. I've never been trained this hard in my entire life. Tomura 4FNG, 21:17. It's going that well? Night Doria, 21:17. I resent you for convincing me this was a good idea. Tomura 4FNG, 21:18. This one is yours. I said go with your gut. Night Doria, 21:19. My gut says we were both wrong. But I am learning a lot. I should be free from all bone breaking soon. Tomura 4FNG, 21:20. You win some, you lose some, player 2. Night Doria, 21:31. Tomura. I think a friend of mine is about to make a bad decision. I don't know how to help. Tomura 4FNG, 12:34. I'm bad at people, but be there for him. It's always saved me when you did that. Tomura is watching, and finally something is going right. Destruction litters the streets just as Sensei wanted, and the Nomu's cries fill a burning Hosu. He didn't need Stain to make his mark, didn't need the self-righteous asshole trying to force meaning into Tomura's work. Tomura knows what he's doing, and Sensei had made him strong enough to do this on his own. He just needs to prove it to the man. In the distance, you can see a pillar of ice breathed in smoke. Its peak rises from an alley a fair distance away from the Nomu, and immediately Tomura feels uneasy. His nails find his neck. This needs to be perfect. He can't fail again. He doesn't want to know what happens if he fails again. Beside him, Kurogiri watches the scene with narrowed eyes, impassive. The man has been off lately, a mirror to the twisted blizzard that Tomura's thoughts have swollen into. He speaks less when they are in the bar, eyes wearily flickering to the TV, and more when they are alone, cramped in one of the back rooms. Kurogiri's gaze stops scanning the city and focuses in one direction, sharply and suddenly. There, by that same alley, Tomura can see the winged Nomu swoop down and rise again with burdened flaps of its wings. It sends the crowd around it into a flurry, like ants fleeing a trot upon an anthill. Tomura's hands, still against his neck, drops of red littering them. His stomach twists with a rolling excitement, surprise, and nervousness, because this will be something to prove his capability to Sensei, to tighten his grip on the only thing that's been a steady part of his life for over 15 years. He can't lose this. It's all he has. The Nomu approaches in fits of speed, obviously struggling with its captive's weight and resistance, until it's a little closer and Tomura feels his stomach drop like a stone. He can just barely see the green hair and bright red shoes struggling in the talons of the Nomu. Moments pass like molasses as the creature approaches, until it finally reaches the water tower and sets down, dropping its captive harshly to the ground. Tomura lifts a hand and sees red. The Nomu dies with a cracked shriek, its corpse whisked away by Kurogiri before it can fall and crush the prone form before it. He can't breathe. It feels as though his world is falling apart again, shattered inwards and inwards and inwards, because Izuku has shifted just enough to stare at him, bleeding sluggishly from his leg and torso. Some of the dust that had once been the Nomu settles over him like a shroud. His best friend looks heartbroken, and Tomura can't help but drop beside him, pinkies folded in and his hands shake, unsure what to do. It's worse this time, because he's hurt Izuku now, torn, jagged lines across his ribs and stolen him away from his internship. I don't know how to help, he whispers, still shaking, still only feeling panic and the cool night air and loss. This is the end. The words are the only ones he knows to say, because they're the ones Izuku had given him so long ago. Tell me what you need. They're the only ones anyone has ever given him. Izuku's hand lifts from where it had been cutting aside, over the talon marks the Nomu had left behind, and wraps around Tomura's, his pinky pinned between their palms. His hand is warm and ragged and covered in jagged scars. It's a touch unlike any Tomura can remember. It is Izuku's kindness, offered wholeheartedly even as he bleeds. The hero's grip tightens a little, the blood on his hands tacky and distracting, and tugs, drawing Tomura's gaze from their hands to Izuku's face. As he does so, his gaze darts away to Kurogiri for a split second, squinting before he focuses back. Be who you are, Tomura, whoever you truly want to be. Izuku uses his frozen hand to pull himself out of the curled position he landed in so he could sit up. You can be angry without suffering, make mistakes without feeling fear. That's all I need from you. The words feel like a net around Tomura, trapping him and dragging him in, but all he's ever known is to fight the truths that resonate so deeply within him. But I am who I want to be, he says, because he is. Tomura is strong, and if he can prove it, Sensei will be proud of him. He needs Sensei to be proud of him. Without that, all he has is a friend who he's hurt over and over again. Izuku gets to his feet, unsteady on his injured leg, and grabs Tomura's other hand, and something in Tomura's chest feels as though it has cracked. A hairline fracture inching through him. A fracture in a dam that had been there since he could remember. His best friend stares up at him with such conviction, a sad smile on his face as he speaks. You're what your sensei made you into, Tomura. He shakes their hands as though trying to emphasize his point. But you don't have to be. There is a crackle, like lightning about to strike, and Izuku is gone, green glow trailing after him. Tomura's hands are cold. He had never really noticed before. From the Mists of Our Pasts by nolov louscr. Summary. 2 months later, apparently just before Midoriya's birthday, Tomura begins calling the boy Izuku. Some days, when Kurogiri passes his room in the dead silence of night, he can hear him laughing. The muffled, carefully dampened sound, engineered not to carry, breaks his heart. The laugh is not one of a carefree 16-year-old, but of a terrified child so unused to joy. Kurogiri's heart breaks often and sharply, and he never does get so used to it. Chapter 1. Taller Each Day. Kurogiri, for nearly as long as he can clearly remember, has been caring for Shigaraki Tomura. His existence boils down to the boy, transporting all for one, little pleasures in life, and the two halves of himself at war. Sometimes, when his head doesn't feel as much like it's splitting in two, he ponders whether All for One knows the consequences of such a bond. He thinks that the man, in his innumerable years of living, may have forgotten what so long caring for someone so wholeheartedly is like. For Kurogiri, watching over the boy becomes more than his obligation, even after the first year, when Tomura is still so small and terrified of his own hands and still unchanged by All for One. More than once, he wishes those 3 years had inspired in him the same loyalty he holds to the boy now, instead of the stifling devotion to All for One that he had overpowered it for so long. If they had, Kurogiri thinks Tomura wouldn't know anger and fear as such close friends, wouldn't stare at blank screens with hollowed eyes and shaking hands. He thinks Tomura might have been okay, might have seen the world without the blood-red lens that had been forced upon him. It doesn't take too long to recognize that raising Tomura feels like being trapped between the barriers of a traditional tragedy, his own failings to be something he wasn't stitched into, and All for One's twisted words dragging the boy, who may as well be Kurogiri's son, down and down and down into his downfall. There isn't a thing in the world he'd trade for the joy of watching Tomura grow, though. Kurogiri is pretty sure he isn't supposed to feel joy, or anything else aside from devotion and loyalty. It's just one more secret he will eventually take to his grave. Same as he keeps the thoughts that leave him blurry and confused and cracked in two. All the ones he doesn't want erased. A secret. Tomura grows, and Kurogiri knows as an irrefutable truth that he will one day have to watch the boy die. Something small and cracked in his heart knows that it will be at All for One's hands. For all his strength, and for 12 long years, he is powerless to change any of this. They are both too bound to All for One, Tomura too binded to his sensei for anything else. Then, when Tomura is 16, the world begins to shift beneath them at a snail's pace. Tomura tells him about Midoriya a week after they begin playing together online. Kurogiri can admit to not fully understanding the boy's interest in the games, but it is another secret from All for One that is suspended between them, and it's good for him to have interests outside of what is forced upon him. It gives him hope that maybe one day Tomura will be able to be his own person. 2 months later, apparently just before Midoriya's birthday, Tomura begins to call the boy Izuku. Some days, when Kurogiri passes his room in the dead silence of the night, he can hear him laughing. The muffled, carefully dampened sound, engineered not to carry, breaks his heart. The laugh is not one of a carefree 16-year-old, but of a terrified child so unused to joy. Kurogiri's heart breaks often and sharply, and he never does get used to it. The day after he hears it, they go out for lunch, because Kurogiri can't speak freely in the bar, can't risk the consequences. He is too scared of what may happen to him or Tomura. Not for the first time, he realizes that he would do anything for the boy. They eat and talk quietly, and for a while it feels like being normal. Then, after they've paid for their food, but before they actually leave, Kurogiri finally broaches the subject he's been working up to for the whole afternoon. "I think it'd be best if you avoided talking about Midori outside of your room, Tomura," he says. He knows that All For One is twisted anger into Tomura's being like spears pierced through his chest. He's watched the sweet, scared boy fall away into one whose fear triggered hatred. He also knows that it is not too late. Tomura is still barely more than a child, young and wanting so desperately for the world to make sense, to be safe. So the sudden and sharp fury in his eyes, as though he's been betrayed, is not surprising. Nor is the ease with which Tomura caught on that he's hinting to not divulge the information about his friend to All For One. Nothing that isn't expertly hidden slips by the 16-year-old unless he wants it to. "I don't need to keep anything from Sensei," Tomura growls, and below his hand a napkin turns to dust, along with a tiny portion of the table. 5 grooves etched where his fingers had dipped down. Kurogiri has had the time and cause to become excellent at twisting his words. It comes in handy, as it always does. He tilts his head and leans back slightly, watches Tomura with concerned eyes that he could never fake. "Keeping your actions with Midori from Sensei isn't betraying him, Tomura. You are allowed to live outside of your role as his successor. You are more than his pawn." There is a tenseness over Tomura's shoulders, like he is still unsure, teetering between his choices. His downturned face twists with that same anger, then floods with confusion and fear and weariness. Something clicks and he looks up at Kurogiri, eyes flicking nervously around the restaurant, as though looking for someone who may be watching before he nods, just barely. "You won't tell him I'm keeping a secret?" Tomura asks, focusing back on the grooves he left on the table. The question feels like the downward swing of a pickaxe, and the stone, Kurogiri's ties to All For One. Years wear on. They are the same in All For One's careful manipulation of Tomura, and different in how Midori's existence seems to undo the looser stitches. So little changes, but Tomura seems to flourish with the companionship, even though there are still bad days. The first thread of blind faith is cut when they attack the OSJ. A boy stumbles from the lake, eyes unfocused, and so many more things at once as his classmates try to stop him, and he stares at them. His terror, his mourning and loss and devastation feels like something tangible on the air. Tomura hasn't seen the boy yet, too distracted by his nails at his neck and looming failure. Realization, slow and terrible, drips through Kurogiri right before Tomura turns. The boy makes a choked noise, like there are too many words on his tongue for any to escape. Then a whispered, "Tomura?" and the sheer snap closed. The name Izuku, for 3 long years, has been something like hope for Kurogiri. The boy has green hair and green eyes and is Tomura's only friend. Things change. More than before, Kurogiri can see reticence in Tomura's interactions with All For One, his questioning and confusion. There is doubt for the first time. Some days, Tomura returns from All For One missing pieces of his memories, but the doubt does not go with them. When Tomura asks him to watch the sports festival with him, Kurogiri can't say no. So they sit in Tomura's room and watch on his computer as Midori Izuku blows through the events with a determination that awes Kurogiri. It reminds him of someone he can't remember. When Tomura is focused on the screen, Kurogiri can feel his form lose definition, shatter and pool like something broken. The voices of Present Mike and Eraserhead feel like knives against the fragile halves of himself. It feels like he's falling apart over and over again. All For One doesn't allow for any more of what he claims is Tomura stalling after the sports festival. He tells him to meet with the hero killer. Beneath the murderer's jagged blades, the second string snaps, and Kurogiri can't do anything else to ease the pain that comes with it. Immobilized by Stain's quirk and watched so pressingly by All For One, he can only watch as beneath the bloodstained indifference of his ward, pain and desperation and betrayal clash. When Stain leaves, Kurogiri scrubs Tomura's blood out of the bar's flooring. There is so much of it, and the part of Kurogiri that feels too human feels sick by the red against the floor. That same sliver fills him with the need to see Tomura as soon as he finishes cleaning. He finds him curled in his bed, one hand clutching where Kurogiri had stitched and bandaged his wound. There are drops of blood across the floor, like he'd paced until the wound had hurt too much to continue. There are tears on his pillow. Kurogiri sits on the bed beside Tomura's hip and tries to think of how to help. He wishes he could make the pain stop, like he did when Tomura was 5, and would scrape his elbows and the pain could be thwarted by a band-aid and theatrics. Red eyes stare at him, hazy and exhausted in a way that makes it clear he's more asleep than awake, and Tomura whispers like a secret. Do you think we deserve to be saved? Kurogiri wishes his heart was strong enough not to shatter. Tomura's eyes close before he can answer. All for One whisks the boy away the next day, and he returns hollowed out and angry. As much as it hurts, Kurogiri is not surprised. Over the next few days, Tomura balances out, becomes less of a puppet and more of himself, but it takes longer than usual. They are sent to Hosu to wreak havoc, with a few weaker Nomu, and Tomura seems terrified of failing. The chaos dwindles as the Nomus die, until only one is left, flying to them clumsily. In its claws is a small body, green hair, and a hero suit. Midoriya Izuku is dropped carelessly onto the water tower, bleeding and limp. Tomura's hand falls and decays the winged Nomu without hesitation, a snarl on his face, red eyes blazing. The dust is easy to warp away. There is so much blood, though, spread across Midoriya's thigh and leaking from his torso, and before Kurogiri can move to help, Tomura is there, hands shaking. His pinkies are tucked in so he won't accidentally decay anything, and he looks lost. Midoriya is calm and composed, and Kurogiri feels a little useless. He watches as the last of Tomura's unwavering devotion to All for One is cut away with only slow words and gentle hands. They don't go back to the bar after Midoriya disappears in a halo of green, the color of hope. Instead, they hide away in a house that Kurogiri knows the coordinates for, but can't remember where he learned them. For a long time, Tomura sits in the living room and stares at his friend's blood in his hands until the first tear falls. It turns pink where it lays in his palms. Then, the 19-year-old starts sobbing. He leaves red handprints on his face where he tries to hold himself together, and his hands grow damp and the blood is left behind. Kurogiri can only offer him small comforts until he falls asleep, curled into a pained ball, 2 thin limbs wrapped around himself. It is cold in the house, though, and Kurogiri can't quite feel things like that, so Tomura wakes back up shivering. He doesn't speak as he leaves for one of the rooms to find warmth. Kurogiri wishes he was still human enough to help. Wishes he were human enough to save the boy that is, but isn't his son. Wishes he could have done this such a long time ago. Chapter 2. A Hand Outstretched. The cabin is cold and empty and too large. Each shadow feels watchful and each hollow consuming. Tomura hates it. All he knows here, now that they are out of the bar and from under his sensei's watch, is that he is scared and that they might be found. That sensei will arrive to twist Tomura back between his fingers like some warped toy. The cabin isn't safe. No matter how many times Kurogiri says it is, promises he knows he'd never been here with sensei, Tomura can't forget that it's still sensei. He had found Tomura, hand outstretched, when he was still little and lost and covered in dust and blood, and there is nothing stopping him from doing so again. It's all they can do to try to hide, to break the phone Sensei had given them and warped the twisted metal away. It feels like losing Izuku all over again as they drop broken glass and metal into an inky void. Tomura can't reach out to apologize, to beg forgiveness. He can't make sure his best friend is okay, healing. He is stuck, powerless and weak. It's all they can do to stay inside and quiet, scared like mice. By the 3rd day, Tomura's whole body itches, like his skin has been rubbed with fiberglass and left to burn down to his shaking bones. Kurogiri wraps a damp towel around his neck that only makes him colder, but Tomura thanks him nonetheless. It seems like the right thing to do as they sit on the freezing tiles of the bathroom floor and Tomura tries not to claw himself to ribbons. Together, alone and unwatched for the first time Tomura can truly remember, things feel different. Kurogiri feels warmer, more real even as they freeze. It'll be okay, he assures when he lays another towel down the red rash of Tomura's arm, where the skin flakes and burns. A small part of Tomura believes him. He doesn't know how or why, but he knows Kurogiri is telling the truth.
What did we do?
The words sound scared in the chilly air, and Tomura hates the weakness so plainly laid out. Kurogiri removes the towel on his neck and dries the skin, reaching through a portal to somewhere to pull out a bottle of lotion. I do not know yet, Tomura, but we will figure it out. We'll be safe here in the meantime. The modicum of comfort the words provide, along with the lotion against his aggravated skin, loosen the iron tension in Tomura's shoulders. Nothing is okay yet, but there's a chance things will be. On the 4th day in the cabin, Tomura wakes up with fire in his blood and fog falling from his lips. The chill has only grown, but for the first time in his life, Tomura feels free. The realization hits him as he watches the morning sun disappear behind a bank of clouds. He doesn't feel like he's being watched. He doesn't need to die trying to fit into the shell Sensei had offered with biting hands. Part of him, angry and warped like plastic left too close to flame, chokes on salvation in open space, bile rising like lava against the unfamiliar feeling. It is not twisted glee or a crackling anger or cowed fear, so it sits wrong and displaced against the false core of him that has made a home there for too long. The rest, the growing parts painted with the late nights and Izuku's kindness, exalts in the air in his lungs and freezing wind on his face as he slips out the window and onto the roof. The world feels less terrifying there. Everything simplifies to the ground below and the sky above, and Tomura suspended between both, perched on the roof of a building that is too cold and too big. Beyond that, there is the sun, the half-faded moon, Kurogiri somewhere nearby, and Izuku somewhere further away. It's the best Tomura has ever felt. There is no threat on the roof. There are no expectations. Only himself. Slowly, like molasses off a spoon, he realizes what Izuku meant the last time they spoke. Kurogiri brings him to a public library and nods subtly towards the computers, gaze careful from where the both of them are tucked into the shadow of 2 bookshelves. They've been cooped up in the cold safe house for a week, and the change in location is a blessing, especially when Tomura realizes just how much warmer the library is. His sweater comes off quickly as he sits in front of the nearest computer, keeping an eye on Kurogiri reading something in a nearby, slightly hidden armchair. It's nearly muscle memory to pull up the desktop version of the messenger he's used for years, and to log in with a password he knows by pattern more than content at this point. There are new messages in his chat with Izuku, and Tomura's shoulders tense with nerves. He doesn't know what to expect. 5 days ago. My Doria, 2347. Tomura, are you okay? I don't think you've gone without texting for more than a day since before. My Doria, 2348. Incoming call. My Doria, 2351. Call ended. 0 minutes. My Doria, 2352. Did something happen? 4 days ago. My Doria, 1308. I just got released from the hospital, all healed up and everything. Please let me know you're alive. My Doria, 1522. I told Eraserhead that you stopped replying. I don't know what else to do, or if that was even the right thing to do. My Doria, 1551. Please stay safe. 2 days ago. My Doria, 1047. We're back in school. Well, since yesterday at least. I hope you're at least able to see these. Eraserhead is even starting to look concerned about how worried I look all the time. Let me know if you're okay. Tomura drops his head to the desk for a minute, squeezing his eyes shut, trying to tamp down the guilt. Underneath, he knows Izuku would be glad that he and Kurogiri aren't at the sensei anymore, but the less rational part of him cracks underneath the realization that he's left Izuku to feel like this. Through the guilt, there isn't even room for him to feel anything, not disgust nor confusion, at the mention of Eraserhead. He pulls his hood lower over his head in case anyone besides Kurogiri is watching, and replies. Tomura 4 FNG, 1203. I'm glad you're okay, player 2. We had to ditch our phones so Sensei couldn't track us. Me and Kurogiri are safe for now. I don't know when it'll be safe to find a computer again, but I'll try, especially after we figure out what we're going to do. Tomura doesn't know what else to say, so he waits, hoping nervously that Izuku will be able to message before the time limit he and Kurogiri had decided on expires. Each minute feels like nails down a chalkboard until Izuku's icon changes to online just before they have to leave. My Doria, 1215. Let me help. Eraserhead would too, who gave info about All for One. Tomura 4 FNG, 1215. I will. There isn't time to wait for Izuku to reply. Tomura logs out, deletes any history of his ever logging in, and slips into the shadows that they had entered through. Denser and darker than it had been a minute ago. On the other side, there is cold air and a feeling almost like safety. Tomura keeps Izuku's offer of help close to his chest for the next few days. Holed up beneath his heart where the core of his anger had been slowly eroding, or even if Sensei finds them again, he will still have it. It feels like fate. A private little shard of hope. They've been free for a week and a half, and it still feels surreal. It feels like flying as Tomura sits on the roof and stares at whatever is brightest above. Then he tells Kurogiri, and something like a plan comes together. It's a rushed job, but they manage. Tomura knows from Izuku that UA will be taking exams for the first half of the coming week, so they'll have to go to him afterwards. Kurogiri hires Getten and pays him an exorbitant amount of money, which Tomura does not ask the origin of, to spread the word that they've fled Japan using Kurogiri's quirk, and some documents from an especially disreputable forger. All that's left is to trust Izuku and Eraserhead. Tomura's gut twists at the thought. Izuku is Izuku, but Eraserhead is a hero, and that ball of anger so ingrained in his chest comes to life with the title. The rage, as it rises, feels irrational though, feeble beneath inspection, but still so ready to flare up that it makes Tomura sick. The days pass slowly as everything plays out. There is no way to know if Sensei will hear the rumors about them leaving. There is no way to be sure that they won't be found by him. 2 days after UA releases their students from classes and exams, Tomura finds Izuku by accident. He's circled by a group of his classmates, and they all seem happy, excited, and it's the first time Tomura has seen any of them in something besides hero outfits or UA's uniform. It makes something small and guilty twist in his gut, seeing how young the 18 of them present look. A second later, the flow of the crowded mall shifts around him, and he's forced back into the alcove beside the nearest store's entrance, still watching Izuku. He was only supposed to be out to pick up some supplies while Kurogiri was busy with planning and talking to Giran, but Izuku is here, and Tomura can feel his offer to help like a physical pull against his ribs. It is not part of the plan. That doesn't mean it isn't an opportunity, though. It takes a long time for Izuku's class to drift apart, slipping into smaller groups and wandering across the mall. Tomura doesn't bother tracking them beyond as a means to stay out of sight, solely focusing on catching Izuku alone for just a moment. Time is running out, and the sooner something happens, the better. The last person in Izuku's group, a young girl with short brown hair, hurries away, and the blood in Tomura's chest feels both burning and freezing, racing past his heart much too quickly. Izuku is staring at his phone, seated on one of the mall's many brick ledges that serve as benches. With his feet just barely missing the ground from the too tall perch, he looks smaller than he had when he'd been dropped before Tomura and Hosu, but no less sturdy. Like something real, sculpted of trust and hope, like a dream. Here, there is a flash of something, and not quite memory. There is a smile, and dark, windswept hair, and the colour yellow. There are 2 small hands clutching an old picture, as if it had whispered something of what the future would hold for him. It feels like the simplest thing in the world to sit down beside Izuku. The crowd moves around them like a living thing, and through the shifting tides, time feels frozen in the space surrounding them. Air catches in Tomura's chest for a 1-2 beat before he can bring himself to speak. "It's been a while, player 2, he says, voice aching from such little use over the past week. And for a moment, Izuku is so still that Tomura isn't sure he heard him. Then, without looking, Izuku's head tips to the side, resting against Tomura's shoulder like he's done so a million times before. The barely there pressure feels like all the weight of the world, trust as a promise pressed against the ragged fabric of Tomura's old hoodie. Here, he is Atlas trapped beneath the sky, but not unwillingly. "It has, hasn't it?" Izuku whispers, his feet swinging back and forth and the heels of his shoes thump against the brick like a heartbeat. His head lifts and turns to meet his eyes, and suddenly it feels like Tomura is stuck in a storm made of lightning that chases Izuku's shadow. "Tell me how to help you, Tomura." It isn't the first time he's heard Izuku say these words, but this time something vital feels as though it's been pulled from the honeycomb mess rotting in his chest. It isn't the first time he needed to hear these words either. Then, he had been 5 and huddled in the backyard, a fresh handprint across his face and his family watching stiff and frozen and silent from across the yard. Then, hours before his palm had killed first Monchan, then Hana, then everyone else. The dam breaks. Memories tear through him as though searching for revenge, and Tomura tries to stand, flight response kicking in, only to find himself on the floor of the mall beside Izuku's feet moments later. The few seconds that have passed, a haze of black in his mind. The waves of fear and anger that had been a part of him for as long as he can remember crest and crash, thunderous against his bones. Every heaving breath of air feels like salt water in his lungs. There is nothing to see or feel or hear but the past, an avalanche of pain, and beneath the before, memories of sensei that feel foreign and are washed in Tomura's blood. Shimura Kotaro's hand falls and falls and falls against Tomura's cheek, trailing terror and pain. Then, black turns green, and a different hand, rough and familiar, replaces the nightmare that is his father's. His best friend's hand reaches out, down to where Tomura has crouched, shaking between fear and rage and confusion, emotions and memories bubbling through him like lava. He had been doing so well, keeping everything in line and making sense, reminding himself that he was free. So it seems only fitting that he would break now, when everything, including the present, has become a memory. The pose is so familiar, and he is somehow 5 again, alone and terrified and staring up into the face of fear. A beat, and this is where the scene varies, where things that had been become things that are. Midoriya Izuku is his best friend, who waited for him whenever he couldn't bring himself to exist outside of a phantom image and forgave him for everything. His best friend, who he trusts more than the ground beneath his feet and the air he breathes. His best friend, who he trusts more than himself. He realizes with a start, staring up at big green eyes and the worry on Izuku's face, that he feels safe. There is still anger, that confused and jagged part of him trying to tear him into two, but he feels safe. Tomura had already been saved once before, dragged from hell kicking and screaming. How can he need to be saved again? Why is he so weak that once wasn't enough? Izuku wants to help. He's said it so many times in so many ways, and each time the scared, angry, forged part of Tomura feels cornered, lashes out. Because accepting that help has always meant weakness, and weakness meant Sensei would abandon him, and he would be alone again, and he would be nothing. Now, Tomura thinks maybe help is what he needs, and has needed for too many years to count. "I'll protect you," Izuku says, voice like iron and lightning and promise, face like stone carved with conviction. Everything about him screams honesty, etches sincerity into the air around him. "You'll be safe,"